This is a compilation of over 2 hours of Elden Ring mysteries explained, so sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. Let's kick things off with Elden Ring's biggest unsolved mysteries explained. In today's video, I'm explaining Elden Ring's biggest unsolved mysteries. From gods that vanished without explanation to timelines that make zero sense, these mysteries have kept millions of players theorizing for years. But first, we need to talk about the Gloam-eyed Queen, because if the community is right about her identity, then half of Elden Ring's story is built on a lie Marika has been hiding since before the Erd Tree even existed. The Gloam-eyed Queen. The Gloam-eyed Queen was the original god killer before Marika even thought about building her golden empire. She wielded destined death, which is basically the only thing in Elden Ring's universe that can permanently kill gods, and she had an entire cult of followers who skinned gods and wore them like coats. The game tells us Meliketh defeated her and sealed away destined death, which conveniently let Marika establish the Golden Order where nobody important could actually die. Her followers became the godskin apostles and nobles, those nightmare fuel bosses that stretch like rubber and summon black flames that eat through your health bar regardless of how much vigor you pumped. The black flame incantations you can use all connect back to her, dealing damage based on maximum HP instead of your faith stat, which makes them uniquely powerful against tanks and bosses. Every item description related to the godskins mentions being cradled as newborns, implying she raised an entire generation of god-slaying fanatics from infancy. But here's where it gets weird. The community can't agree on who she actually was. The most popular theory says she's Melina, because Melina has one eye that glows violet and threatens to deliver destined death in the frenzied flame ending. That connection seems solid until you realize the timeline doesn't work. The Gloam-eyed Queen was defeated before the Golden Order even existed, but Melina talks about being given purpose by her mother at the foot of the Erd Tree, which means she came after. Some people think she was an aspect of Marika herself, which would explain why Marika sent her own shadow beast to defeat her, but that raises the question of why Marika would fight herself. Others point to the Hornsent connections, since the DLC revealed Marika's whole backstory involves slaughtering horned people, but there's zero evidence linking the Gloam-eyed Queen to horns or the Land of Shadow. The DLC was supposed to clear this up. Everyone expected at least a mention, maybe a boss fight, something concrete. Instead, we got more black flame enemies and exactly zero answers about who she was or what happened to her after the defeat. The Godskin Apostles are still out there doing their thing, which means either she's dead and they're operating on autopilot, or she's somewhere waiting for a sequel that might never come. From Software loves leaving one major villain completely unexplained in every game, and the Gloam-eyed Queen seems to be Elden Ring's choice for that honor. What makes this frustrating is how central she should be to the plot. Destined death is the MacGuffin that drives half the game's conflicts, and she was the original wielder. But instead of a satisfying reveal, we got breadcrumbs scattered across item descriptions and a fan base tearing itself apart over eye colors. But here's the thing. If the Gloam-eyed Queen wielded destined death before Marika even built the Golden Order, why does Marika share a body with someone who has the exact same red hair curse? Keep that question in mind, because the answer isn't what the community thinks. Marika and Radagon. Queen Marika the Eternal and Radagon of the Golden Order are the same person. The game straight up tells you this with the Law of Regression incantation, which reveals a statue message saying Radagon is Marika. Not a metaphor, not a spiritual connection, literally the same physical body. Here's what we know for sure. Marika was a Newman who ascended to godhood through the Gate of Divinity in the Land of Shadow, probably by stepping over a mountain of corpses, if the DLC environmental storytelling is any indication. At some point, she either created or became Radagon, a red-haired champion who invaded Liurnia, married Renala, had 3 kids with her, then abandoned that entire family to return and become Marika's consort. When Marika shattered the Elden Ring, Radagon tried to repair it, which means they were literally fighting themselves inside the same body. The final boss fight has you fighting Radagon first, then the Elden Beast pulls Marika's corpse out of the same body you just killed, confirming they share physical space. The red hair is its own mystery. Radagon was ashamed of it and tried to hide it with magic, which some item descriptions link to a curse from the fire giants. But if Radagon is Marika, and Marika ordered the genocide of the fire giants, why would she curse herself? Unless the curse came first and motivated the genocide, but that still doesn't explain how a Newman woman ended up with giant curse markers. Then there's Messmer, who the DLC confirms is Marika's son and has the same red hair as Radagon. If Messmer existed before Marika married Godfrey, that means Radagon had to exist before the official timeline says he did, which breaks the entire chronology of demigod births. The community throws around the term Rebis a lot, which is an alchemical concept about a being that's both male male and female, at once. That fits the self-marriage angle and explains why all their kids have weird problems, like Melania rotting from the inside and Michaela being stuck as a child forever. Incest is bad enough, but self-incest apparently breaks biology in exciting new ways. The real question is whether they started as one being who split, or two beings who merged, or if Marika just created Radagon as a tool and he developed his own consciousness. The game refuses to clarify, probably because From Software thinks cosmic hermaphrodite gods are cooler when nobody understands how they work. This matters because their duality drives the entire plot. The shattering happened because Marika and Radagon wanted opposite things and had one body to fight over. Every ending involves dealing with their corpse-statue hybrid. Understanding what they are would explain half the game's conflicts, but instead we're left guessing whether Marika has dissociative identity disorder, or if this is some outer god nonsense that operates on dream logic. That duality would just be weird. From Software lore, except Marika had a son with the same red hair before Radagon supposedly existed, which means either the timeline is broken, or Marika's been hiding something about her children that the DLC only made worse. And that son? He's the key to understanding why Marika veiled an entire continent. Mesmer the Impaler. Mesmer is Marika's abandoned son who she sent to the Land of Shadow to commit genocide against the Hornsent, then sealed away behind a veil so nobody in the lands between would remember he existed. He's got a base serpent living inside him that he keeps suppressed with a magical seal over his eye. And when you fight him, he begs his mother to curse him one more time before ripping it out and going full monster mode. The DLC makes him the emotional center of its story. You find his letters to Marika, begging for acknowledgement, while she sends back nothing. His Fire Knights still worship him centuries later. The entire Land of Shadow is covered in impaled corpses and scorched earth from his crusade, which he carried out because Marika ordered it as revenge for what the Hornsent did to her people. He introduced a whole moveset based on flame spears and serpent grabs, drops a remembrance worth 1,000,000 runes, and has voice lines that hit harder than most From Software villains because he knows he's been thrown away for doing exactly what his mother wanted. But his timeline makes no sense. The red hair suggests Radagon is his father, which means Radagon had to exist before Marika married Godfrey. But all the established lore says Radagon showed up during the Liurnian Wars, which happened after Godfrey's reign. Some people theorize Mesmer is older than all the other demigods, conceived in the Land of Shadow before Marika even left for the lands between. But that creates its own problems, because it means Radagon existed before the Erdtree. Others think the red hair is from the giant curse, and has nothing to do with Radagon, but then who's the father? The game won't say. The serpent inside him is another dead end. It's called a base serpent, which sounds like it connects to the god-devouring serpent that Rykard merged with, but there's no established link between them. Some item descriptions hint at serpents being ancient enemies of the Erdtree, others suggest they're just powerful beasts, and the game never commits to either interpretation. Mesmer's seal suppresses it, implying Marika gave him both the curse and the solution. But why curse your own son with a monster that might eat him from the inside? The only explanation is that she needed someone expendable to do her dirty work, and what better tool than a kid who literally can't refuse because you built self-destruct mechanics into his body. Here's what drives people crazy. The DLC was supposed to be Mesmer's story. He's on the cover art. He's in every trailer. The expansion is named after the place he rules. And yet, after you kill him, the game moves on like he barely mattered. No final letter from Marika, no explanation for the serpent, no resolution to whether he was right to follow orders or should have rebelled. Just a boss soul and some Fire Knight armor. Then Michaela shows up and steals the entire plot. From Software loves tragic villains, but Mesmer might be their most underutilized one. Everything about him suggests he should be as important as Melania or Radahn, but instead he's a footnote whose biggest mysteries got ignored by his own DLC. Mesmer being abandoned would be tragic enough, but the Land of Shadow he was sent to shouldn't exist according to established lore. Marika veiled it from reality itself using a method the game refuses to explain. The question is, what else did she hide there that was worth erasing an entire landmass from existence? The Land of Shadow Veil. Marika sealed the Land of Shadow away from the lands between using some kind of divine concealment that makes it physically impossible to reach or remember. The DLC makes you travel there through Michaela's corpse after he deliberately let Mohg kidnap him, which is a whole separate issue we'll get to later. Once you're there, the Scattered Tree stands as a shadowy mirror to the Erdtree, providing grace points and map fragments like nothing's wrong, except this place is supposed to be outside reality. The veil itself is described vaguely across multiple items. Some say Marika created it during her ascension to godhood. Others imply it was a consequence of her purge against the Hornsent, like she wanted to hide the evidence of her genocide. The mimic veil item you can find suggests the concealment works through illusion magic, but that doesn't explain how an illusion could physically separate an entire landmass landmass from the rest of the world. The Shadowkeep and surrounding areas show no signs of being projections or fake. Everything there operates on normal game rules, so either the veil is purely metaphysical or From Software didn't think through the mechanics of divine hiding spaces. What bothers people is how casually the game treats it. You enter through Miquella's corpse cocoon, which raises immediate questions about how he knew the way in if the veil erases memories. The answer seems to be that he's an Empyrean with special permissions, but the game never explains what those permissions are or how they bypass Marika's seal. You can travel back and forth between the Lands Between and Land of Shadow freely after the first visit, using the same cocoon as a fast travel point, which suggests the veil is less impenetrable barrier and more really good lock that breaks once you find the key. That doesn't match the cosmic horror implications of a goddess erasing an entire continent from collective memory. The Scaduatree's existence compounds the confusion. It grows grace points. It has map fragments. NPCs comment on it like it's a known entity despite supposedly being veiled from knowledge. Either the veil is selective about what it hides, or the game needed the Scaduatree to function as a gameplay element and sacrificed lore consistency to make it work. Knowing From Software? Probably the latter. They've never let world building get in the way of putting a bonfire somewhere convenient. Then there's the question of why Marika veiled it at all. The obvious answer is guilt over the Hornsent genocide, but Marika doesn't seem like the type to feel guilt about anything. She ordered Mesmer to do it. She built her godhood on Hornsent corpses. Hiding the evidence suggests she thought someone might hold her accountable, which contradicts her entire character as an absolute ruler who rewrites reality to suit her needs. Unless the veil wasn't about hiding the genocide, but about hiding something else in the Land of Shadow, like the Gate of Divinity or the secrets of how she became a god in the first place. But if that's the case, why let Miquella figure it out? Why leave a back door through his corpse? The game gives us a cool, shadowy continent and a handwave explanation that raises 10 new questions for everyone. It answers. A divine veil that erases memory makes sense for hiding genocide, but it doesn't explain why the beings supposedly enforcing divine will can't agree on basic instructions. The two fingers want you to restore order. The three fingers want you to burn everything, and both claim they're following their mother's commands, except their mother admitted she's been abandoned for centuries. The two and three fingers. The two fingers serve as the greater will's messengers throughout the Lands Between. They sit in every major divine tower, communicate through finger readers who translate their slow sign language, and guide Tarnish toward becoming Elden Lord by mending the ring. The three fingers serve Chaos and the Frenzied Flame, living in the sewers beneath Leyndell, where they grab you and burn the flame of frenzy directly into your eyeballs if you strip naked and open the wrong door. The game reveals they both came from Metyr, Mother of Fingers, who's a cosmic horror squid thing you fight in the DLC. She was abandoned by the Greater Will ages ago, and has been sending broken messages to her children ever since, which explains why the two fingers seem confused about what they're supposed to be doing. The three fingers split off at some point for reasons the game won't specify, possibly because of the broken messages, possibly because the Frenzied Flame is an entirely separate outer god that corrupted part of Metyr's family. Nobody knows, and the game won't commit to either interpretation. What makes this maddening is how much the fingers drive the plot without ever explaining their deal. The two fingers tell you to become Elden Lord, but they're working off bad intel from an abandoned mom who hasn't heard from her boss in centuries. The three fingers want to burn everything to ash because that's what the Frenzied Flame does, but there's no clear origin for why this flame exists or how it connects to Metyr. Some item descriptions link it to madness and despair from people being abandoned by hope. Others treat it like a primordial force of entropy, and the game acts like these are the same thing when they're fundamentally different concepts. The schism between 2 and 3 matters because it represents the breakdown of divine communication. Metyr was supposed to relay the Greater Will's instructions but got ghosted, so now her children are improvising based on corrupted data. That's a genuinely interesting concept about gods being as clueless as mortals when their phone calls to heaven go unanswered. But instead of exploring that, the game gives you a boss fight against Metyr, some vague dialogue about abandonment, and moves on. You never learn why the split happened. You never learn if the three fingers were always meant to be separate or if they're a mutation. You never learn what the Frenzied Flame actually wants beyond burn it all, which is the least interesting motivation a cosmic force can have. The worst part is that both sets of fingers are useless. The two fingers can't fix anything. They just point you toward other people who might have plans. The three fingers only offer one ending that burns the world and locks you into that path unless you jump through hoops with Millicent's questline. For entities that are supposed supposed to represent cosmic powers beyond mortal comprehension, they accomplish remarkably little except giving you different dialogue options at the end. From Software set up a fascinating concept about broken divine messengers and then did nothing with it except make them vaguely spooky. Abandoned cosmic messengers sending broken instructions would explain the confusion, but it doesn't explain why the first demigod to truly die is still growing, still spreading corruption, still creating new husks centuries after someone supposedly fixed death itself, unless Fia's entire questline was pointless, or unless death in Elden Ring works completely differently than anyone realizes. Godwyn's corpse and death husks. Godwyn the Golden was the first demigod to die during the Night of Black Knives, killed with a fragment of the Rune of Death that let him experience true death instead of Erdtree resurrection. His soul died, but his body lived on, growing into a horrible fish monster thing that spreads death root and creates death husks across the lands between. You can find his corpse beneath Stormvale Castle, and it's somehow also beneath the Erdtree in Deeproot depths, because From Software doesn't believe in making things simple. The death husks are the real mystery. They appear in catacombs and dungeons as lesser versions of Godwyn's face, spreading death blight and corrupting the areas around them. Fia's questline involves laying with Godwyn's corpse to birth a mending rune that brings death back into the Golden Order, which sounds like it should resolve his story, but doesn't. After you complete her quest and use the rune to get the Age of Duskborn ending, the husks are still there. Deathroot still spreads. Godwyn's corpse keeps growing like nothing changed. Either Fia's ritual failed, or the mending rune only affects the metaphysical order without cleaning up the physical mess Godwyn's undeath created. What drives people insane is how much the game sets up Godwyn as a central tragedy without following through. He was beloved by everyone. His death triggered the Shattering. Multiple questlines revolve around him or people affected by his death. Ranni orchestrated the whole thing because she needed someone else to die so she could kill her body without killing her soul, making Godwyn collateral damage in her scheme to escape the Greater Will's control. That's heavy stuff that deserves resolution. But instead, Godwyn's just a growing tumor in the game's sewers that you can't do anything about. The connection between Deathroot and Death Husks never gets explained mechanically. Collecting Deathroot for Gurranq gives you beast incantations and eventually reveals he's Malekith, which matters for his boss fight but doesn't explain what Deathroot actually is. The husks seem to be Godwyn's death spreading like a virus, infecting corpses and turning them into extensions of his undead consciousness. But that's speculation based on visual similarities, rather than confirmed lore. Some people theorize the husks are failed attempts at resurrection, others think they're just ambient corruption from death re-entering the world, and the game provides evidence for both while confirming neither. Then there's the mending rune of the Death Prince, which Fia creates by laying with Godwyn's corpse and birthing it from his undead essence. That's already weird enough, but what it actually does is vague. The Age of Duskborn ending says it brings life within death to the Golden Order, implying undeath becomes a natural part of the cycle instead of an aberration. But Godwyn's husks don't change behavior. Undead enemies throughout the game don't react differently. The ending cutscene shows the Erdtree covered in dark roots and calls it a day, leaving players to guess whether this fixed anything or just made undeath official policy. From Software loves tragic figures whose deaths echo through the entire story, but Godwyn might be their least resolved one. Dark Souls had Artorias, Bloodborne had Lady Maria, Sekiro had Tomo. All of them got complete story arcs even in death. Godwyn got turned into environmental storytelling and a crafting material. Marika's motivations for shattering the ring. Queen Marika shattered the Elden Ring, breaking the fundamental laws of reality and kicking off the wars that destroyed civilization across the lands between. The game treats this as the inciting incident for everything that happens, but never clearly explains why she did it. Most people assume grief over Godwyn's death pushed her over the edge, but that explanation falls apart when you look at the timeline and her actions leading up to the Shattering. First, Marika helped plan the Night of Black Knives. Multiple item descriptions link her to the Black Knife Assassins, who were Newman like her and carried out the assassination using weapons she helped create. If she knew Godwyn was going to die and possibly even arranged it, then grief doesn't work as a motivation. She'd be grieving something she caused, which either makes her insane or means there was a deeper plan that required Godwyn's death as a trigger. Some people think she wanted to break free from the Greater Will's control and needed a dramatic event to justify rebellion, but that still doesn't explain why she'd sacrifice her favorite son instead of literally anyone else. Second, the Radagon problem. When Marika shattered the ring, Radagon immediately tried to repair it, which means they were actively fighting over the same body. If they're the same person with a unified will, why the internal conflict? If they're separate consciousnesses sharing space, why did Radagon care about preserving the Golden Order more than Marika did when she's the one who built it? The game implies Radagon represents loyalty to the greater will, while Marika represents rebellion. But that division only makes sense if they started as separate beings who merged, which contradicts the self-marriage timeline. Third, her actual hammer. The game shows you can literally find Marika's hammer and use it as a weapon. The description says she used it to shatter the Elden Ring in a moment of despair. But despair over what? Godwyn's death works as surface-level motivation, but Marika doesn't come across as someone who acts on emotion. Everything about her character suggests cold calculation. She committed genocide against the Hornsent. She ordered her son to wage eternal war in the Land of Shadow. She built a religion where she was the central deity and everyone else was disposable. That's not a woman who breaks down and smashes reality because she's sad. That's a woman who breaks reality because she decided it needed to be broken. The greater will going silent adds another layer. If Metyr was abandoned centuries ago, that means Marika was ruling without direct divine guidance for ages before the shattering. Maybe she realized the greater will didn't care anymore and decided to take matters into her own hands. Maybe the Golden Order was failing and shattering the ring was a desperate attempt to restart the system. Maybe she just got tired of being a puppet for cosmic forces that stopped paying attention. The game gives hints toward all these interpretations without confirming any. What makes this frustrating is how much depends on understanding Marika's choice. The entire game is about fixing or exploiting what she broke. Every faction has a different idea about what should replace the Golden Order. Every ending offers a different solution to the problem she created, but we don't know what problem she was trying to solve by creating this mess in the first place. Was she liberating the world from tyrannical gods, or throwing a tantrum that destroyed civilization? The answer changes everything about how you interpret the story, and From Software deliberately withholds it. The Outer Gods and their numbers. Elden Ring's universe has multiple outer gods competing for influence over the lands between. The Greater Will is the big one, responsible for the Elden Ring and Golden Order. The Formless Mother wants blood sacrifice. The Scarlet Rot God is exactly what it sounds like. The Twin Bird's deity messes with death, but the game never tells you how many there are, what they want, or how they actually work. At minimum, we've got 4 confirmed through direct references. The Greater Will sent the Elden Beast, and possibly Matter as its representatives. The Formless Mother communicates through blood magic and empowers Mog. The Rot God imprisoned beneath the Lake of Rot created Millennia's curse. The Twin Bird shows up in death sorcery descriptions as an ancient force connected to death birds and ghost flame. Beyond that, it gets murky. Some people count the frenzied flame as a 5th, but it might just be an aspect of chaos rather than a distinct entity. Others point to the dark moon that Ranni serves, but that could be tied to the greater will or something else entirely. Then you've got schools of magic that might represent forgotten outer gods. Gravity magic comes from the stars and lets you manipulate space-time, which sounds like outer god territory. Glintstone sorcery draws power from the stars and primeval current. The Claymen worship an ancient dynasty tied to an unnamed god. The dragons served Placidusax's god who vanished without explanation. Each of these could be evidence of additional outer gods who lost their influence over time, or they could just be natural phenomena that mortals misinterpreted as divine. The game refuses to clarify because ambiguity is more atmospheric than answers. What we know for sure is that these gods are terrible at their jobs. The Greater Will abandoned Metyr and stopped sending instructions. The Rot God got sealed away and can only spread through millennia. The Formless Mother's only champion is Mog, who spent his life in a sewer and got his body stolen for Radahn resurrection purposes. The Frenzied Flame wants to burn everything but can only reach people through a door in Lendel's basement. For cosmic forces beyond mortal comprehension, they seem remarkably powerless to accomplish anything without mortal intervention. The abandonment pattern is crucial. Multiple item descriptions mention outer gods pulling away or going silent, leaving their followers scrambling. Metyr was abandoned. Placidusax's god fled. The Greater Will stopped responding. This suggests something systematic is happening, like the outer gods are locked in a conflict on a scale mortals can't perceive, or they're dying off, or they're losing interest in this world for reasons the game won't explain. That's fascinating cosmic horror material, the idea that even gods can be abandoned by forces greater than them. But Elden Ring does nothing with it except mention it in item descriptions and move on. The real problem is that treating these as active characters requires understanding their goals, but the game deliberately keeps them vague. Is the Greater Will trying to maintain order, or just use using mortals as tools? Is the formless mother empowering blood magic because she feeds on violence or because she has a plan? Does the rot god want to spread corruption, or is it just existing and corruption happens as a side effect? Every theory about outer god motivations is speculation piled on speculation, because From Software gives you fragments of information and expects you to build a theology from it. Torrent's previous master. Torrent is your spectral steed who you can summon at will to cross the lands between. Melina gives you the whistle that calls him early in the game, but she mentions she's not his original owner. Someone else rode Torrent before you, someone who Melina seems to know and respect, and the game never tells you who. The DLC teases Miquella as a candidate. You can find ghostly images of him riding a spectral steed that looks like Torrent throughout the Land of Shadow, and the timeline roughly works if Miquella traveled there before cocooning himself for Mog kidnapping purposes. But that raises questions about how Melina ended up with the whistle and why she'd give it to you instead of keeping it for when Miquella returned. Unless Miquella gave it to her deliberately, which implies he predicted you'd need it, which sounds like foresight he shouldn't have unless he was planning the entire tarnished resurrection plot alongside Marika. Another theory points to Ranni. She mentions recognizing Torrent when you first meet her, and her dialogue implies a previous connection. But Ranni's been doing her own thing for centuries as a soul in a doll body, so unless she rode Torrent in her previous life before the Night of Black Knives, the timeline doesn't match. Plus, if Torrent belonged to Ranni, why would Melina have the whistle instead of it staying with Ranni's two fingers or discarded body? Some people think the previous master was Marika herself, which would explain why Melina has the whistle since she's heavily implied to be Marika's daughter. That works thematically because it means you're literally following in the goddess's footsteps, riding her horse to fix the mess she created. But there's zero evidence for this beyond it would be poetic, which is a weak foundation for lore conclusions even by From Software standards. The game treating this as a mystery is bizarre because Torrent functions purely as transportation. He's not plot relevant beyond letting you move faster and avoid fall damage. His previous owner doesn't matter mechanically or narratively. The only reason to care is because the game specifically points out he had one and then refuses to elaborate. That's deliberate mystification for its own sake, dangling a question with no answer because From Software knows it'll drive lore hunters crazy. What makes it worse is that Melina clearly knows who it was. Her dialogue when giving you the whistle suggests fondness for the previous master, implying they mattered to her personally, but she never brings it up again. You can exhaust her entire dialogue tree across multiple Grace Site conversations, and she'll talk about her purpose, her mother, her plans to burn the Erd Tree, everything except who rode the magic horse before you. Either it's not important enough to mention, or From Software wrote themselves into a corner by teasing a reveal they never planned to deliver. Giant corpses and ancient structures. The lands between is littered with massive skulls, dragon carcasses, and stone structures that shouldn't exist based on anything the game tells you about its history. Caelid has giant skulls half buried in the ground that are bigger than buildings. The Land of Shadow features a dragon corpse near Jagged Peak that's large enough to serve as terrain. Massive stone coffins appear in multiple areas without explanation of who built them or what they were for. The skulls are the most obvious mystery. They're too big to be fire giants, who are large, but not that large. They're too humanoid to be dragons. Some people theorize they belong to an extinct race that predated the current age, possibly the original inhabitants before the Greater Will arrived, but that's pure speculation based on environmental assets rather than any lore backing. The game mentions ancient wars and fallen civilizations in vague terms, but never connects them to specific structures or remains. The dragon corpse in the DLC is slightly less mysterious because it ties to Baal's assault on Placidusax. You fight Baal at Jagged Peak and learn he led a rebellion against the Elden Lord of Dragons, which explains why there are ancient dragon remains scattered around, but the size is still absurd. The corpse near the peak is multiple times larger than any living dragon you fight, including Placidusax himself, who's missing multiple heads. Either dragons used to be way bigger and shrank over time, or this specific dragon was special for reasons the game won't address. Then there are the walking mausoleums, mobile buildings with legs that wander specific areas, and house soulless demigods. The game explains they exist to preserve the memories of demigods who died before achieving greatness, but not who built them or how they move. They're clearly artificial structures, because you can make them kneel by destroying glowing skulls on their legs. But the engineering required to build a walking cathedral should be significant enough that someone would mention it in item descriptions. Instead, they're just there, walking around, playing sad bell music while you wonder what construction company could create something that complex. The stone coffins are everywhere. They appear in the lands between and Land of Shadow. Always massive, always old, always without context. Some hold spirits you can fight, others just sit there as environmental decoration. The deathbed companions use them for their rituals, but that doesn't explain who built them originally or why they're sized for creatures much larger than any current humanoid race. The implication is that something ancient left these behind, but whether that something was giants, gods, dragons, or something else entirely is never clarified. What bothers people is how much environmental storytelling these structures represent without any actual story. From Software loves showing you ruins and letting you imagine what civilization created them, but Elden Ring takes it too far. These aren't just ruined buildings or old statues. These are impossible structures and remains of creatures that don't fit anywhere in the established lore. They're clearly meant to suggest a deeper history, but that history either doesn't exist in the game's files or exists only as cut content that never got properly integrated. From Software's signature move is putting mysterious ancient things in the background and letting players theorize forever. It worked in Dark Souls with Ash Lake and the Everlasting Dragons. It worked in Bloodborne with the Great Ones and Old Yarnum, but those mysteries had enough context clues to build satisfying theories. Elden Ring's giant corpses and structures have nothing. They're just big and old and there, which makes them frustrating rather than intriguing. From god killers who might still be alive to a hidden continent Marika erased from existence. Today, I'm explaining Elden Ring's biggest mysteries, starting with a queen who hunted gods and then vanished, but the game keeps hinting she never really died. The Gloam-Eyed Queen. The Gloam-Eyed Queen is basically Elden Ring's Kaiser Saz. Everyone talks about her, nobody's seen her, and she might be hiding in plain sight. She was an Empyrean, which means the Two Fingers picked her as a potential god candidate, and she wielded destined death before Marika decided that was bad for business. Here's what we know for sure. She led the Godskins, those horrifying apostles and nobles who hunt gods and wear their skin like designer coats. The Black Flame incantations and the Godslayer's greatsword all point back to her reign of terror. She had the power to permanently kill gods, which in the lands between is basically the nuclear option because immortality is the default setting. Then Malekith, Marika's shadow-bound attack dog, defeated her and sealed destined death into his blade. That should have been the end of the story, except the game keeps dropping hints that it wasn't. The community has three main theories, and they're all equally insane. Theory 1 says she's Melina, because Melina has that creepy gloam eye moment in the frenzied flame ending and talks about delivering destined death. Theory 2 claims she's actually Marika herself, operating under a different identity before establishing the Golden Order, which would explain why Marika later shattered the Elden Ring. She was always planning to break the system. Theory 3 suggests she's a completely separate Empyrean that From Software just decided to leave mysterious because they hate us. The evidence is scattered across item descriptions like breadcrumbs, but none of it definitively confirms anything. What makes this mystery so frustrating is that the Godskins are everywhere, showing up in random catacombs and windmills, still hunting and skinning things thousands of years after their queen supposedly died. If she's really gone, why are her followers still active? And why does the Black Flame, her signature power, still work when destined death got sealed away? But here's the thing, if Marika wanted to build an eternal Golden Order, why leave the Godskins running around with god-killing powers? Keep that question in mind, because the answer connects to our next mystery, Marika's real plan. Marika shattering the Elden Ring is the inciting incident for literally everything in the game, but her motivations are murkier than Caelid's swamp water. The game presents it as this dramatic betrayal. She took a hammer to the cosmic order and broke reality itself, but it never explains why she'd destroy her own empire. The popular theory says it was grief over Godwyn's death during the Night of the Black Knives. Godwyn was her golden boy, the perfect demigod who everyone loved, and when Ranni's conspiracy killed his soul while leaving his body alive, Marika supposedly snapped. She couldn't accept that her immortal son was the first to truly die, so she broke the ring that made death possible in the first place. That's the emotional reading, and it tracks with the tragedy-obsessed storytelling From Software loves. But the evidence suggests something colder and more calculated. Marika was planning rebellion against the greater will long before Godwyn died. She had the rune of death removed from the Elden Ring, commanding Malekith to seal it inside his blade. She married herself as Radagon to maintain control when the greater will wanted a new consort. She sent Godfrey and the Tarnished away with the explicit instruction that they'd lose their grace and then get it back later, basically setting up a backup plan centuries in advance. Every major move she made was positioning pieces for a future break from divine control. The DLC adds another layer because we learn about Marika's past in the Land of Shadow. She came from the shaman village, where her people were hunted and stuffed into jars for some twisted ritual. She climbed from that horror to godhood, which means she understood better than anyone how the greater will operates through puppet strings. The Golden Order wasn't her dream, it was her cage with better interior decorating. Here's where it gets wild. Marika might have orchestrated the Night of the Black Knives Knives herself. She gave Ranni the tools to steal destined death. She ensured Godwyn's death would be partial, creating this undead nightmare that corrupts the Erd Tree from within. She turned her own son into a supernatural time bomb, then shattered the Elden Ring in response, forcing the Greater Will to either fix the mess or watch its order collapse. It's the ultimate power move. Burn down your own kingdom so thoroughly that the god controlling you has no choice but to negotiate. The current interpretation leans toward Marika as revolutionary rather than grieving mother. She wanted out, and she was willing to sacrifice everything to achieve it. The shattering, the demigod war, the endless cycle of violence. All of it was acceptable collateral damage if it meant breaking free from cosmic tyranny. Now, if Marika was playing 4D chess against a literal god, why didn't she just destroy the Elden Ring completely? Because there's one piece she needed to survive, and that brings us to the next question. What happened to Godwyn? Godwyn the Golden died during the Night of the Black Knives, except he didn't really die, he just had his soul murdered while his body kept living. This creates the game's most disgusting ongoing mystery. Why is his corpse spreading like cancer through the underground? The assassination was surgical. Ranni needed to kill her Empyrean body without killing her soul, so she could transfer into a doll and escape her destiny. But destined death requires balance. Two deaths at once. Godwyn's soul died so Ranni's body could die, leaving both of them in this horrifying middle state. Godwyn's soulless body fell into the roots beneath the Erd Tree, and that's when things got biological. His corpse didn't decay normal. Instead, it mutated, grew fish-like features, and started spreading throughout the root system like an infection. Those death root growths you collect, that's Godwyn leaking into the world. Every catacomb and dungeon with those who live in death, the undead enemies that respawn eternally, exists because Godwyn's death without death is breaking the rules of reality itself. He's become a corrupting presence, turning death into something between life and oblivion. The body you find beneath Stormvale Castle is just one growth. There are others scattered through the underground, each one a tumor of failed mortality spreading through the lands between's infrastructure. The game implies this wasn't anyone's intended outcome. Ranni wanted a clean escape, not a zombie plague. Marika definitely didn't want her favorite son turned into undead rot, but destined death doesn't care about intentions. It just executes its function, and when you execute it wrong, you get consequences. Here's what the community debates. Was this outcome predicted? Did someone, possibly Marika herself, know that killing Godwyn this way would create a backdoor to destroy the Golden Order from within? The Erd Tree is supposedly eternal, but with Godwyn rotting through its roots, that eternity has an expiration date. Some theorists argue this was the real assassination, not killing Godwyn, but weaponizing his death to poison immortality itself. Some base game theories suggest Miquella wanted to give Godwyn a true death, but the DLC does not address this. He failed, obviously, but the attempt suggests even the demigods recognized that leaving Godwyn in this state was destabilizing reality. But if Godwyn's spreading corpse is poisoning the Erd Tree, why hasn't the Greater Will intervened? Keep that question simmering, because it connects to something the game barely acknowledges. The Outer Gods. The Greater Will gets all the attention because it's controlling the Golden Order, but it's just one cosmic entity in a very crowded space. Elden Ring has at least 6 Outer Gods fighting for influence over the lands between, and the game treats this polytheistic nightmare like common knowledge, while explaining exactly nothing. The Formless Mother is probably the creepiest. She's the blood god backing Mohg's dynasty, communicating through hemorrhaging and ritual bloodletting. Mohg built an entire underground palace soaked in cursed blood, kidnapped his half-brother Miquella, and tried to force him into becoming a god consort, all because this formless entity whispered that blood dynasties are the future. The Formless Mother doesn't have a physical form. She's just raw desire made manifest, working through believers who are willing to bleed for power. Then there's the Frenzied Flame, which is less a god and more a cosmic delete button. It wants to melt everything back into primordial chaos, burning away all distinctions between life and death, order, and entropy. The Three Fingers serve as its prophet, lurking beneath the capital and offering the most destructive ending in the game. Accept the flame, and you don't just break the Golden Order, you incinerate existence itself. The flame doesn't care about replacing the current system with a better one. It just wants everything gone. The Scarlet Rot has its own outer god, which explains why Millennia's condition is incurable and keeps getting worse. She's not sick. She's a vessel for divine decay. Every time she blooms, she spreads rot across entire regions, turning Caelid into a hellscape where the ground itself is diseased. The rot isn't trying to kill her. It's trying to use her to transform the world into something compatible with its existence. She's patient zero for a cosmic terraforming project. The god of the Deathbirds shows up in item descriptions, representing an older order where death was natural and cyclical before the Erd Tree imposed its rules. The Rune of Death originally belonged to this entity, which means the Golden Order literally stole death from another god and tried to monopolize it. The Deathbirds and their ghost flames still hunt at night, serving a deity that refuses to accept its obsolescence. What makes this terrifying is the implication. If there are 6 known outer gods and probably more we haven't identified, then the entire game is basically a proxy war. The demigods aren't fighting over power. They're unknowingly serving competing cosmic interests. Ranni's Age of Stars ending tries to push all the outer gods out of the equation, creating space for mortal self-determination. But every other ending just swaps which god gets to be in charge. The game never explains where these entities come from, what they want beyond vague concepts like order or chaos, or why they're all obsessed with one planet. Are they extra-dimensional, evolutionary endpoints of belief, leftover code from whoever designed reality? From Software drops these apocalyptic entities into the lore and moves on like it's normal. Now, if the outer gods are fighting over the lands between like cosmic real estate, who's actually running the show? Because the answer involves something from Software hid until the DLC, Meter and the Fingers. The two fingers are the Greater Will's representatives, giving guidance to Empyreans and blessing tarnished with grace. Every major region has one chilling in a tower, offering cryptic advice and generally acting as mission control for the Golden Order. The three fingers are their opposite, representing the frenzied flame's desire to burn everything. That's the setup the base game gives you. Two factions of creepy hand monsters locked in cosmic conflict. Then the DLC drops Meter, Mother of Fingers, and the entire cosmology breaks. Meter is this massive alien creature living in a crater in the Land of Shadow, and she's literally the progenitor of all fingers. She's been abandoned by the Greater Will, sitting alone in the dark for eons, still trying to communicate with a god that stopped responding. Every finger in the game is her offspring, which means the two fingers aren't divine messengers. They're the children of a broken telephone line to space. This revelation destroys the game's entire theological foundation. The two fingers claim to speak for the Greater Will, but their mother has been getting radio silence for centuries. They're not receiving instructions. They're improvising based on outdated protocols and their own interpretations. When they tell you to become Elden Lord, that's not divine will. That's best guess from middle management that got promoted beyond their competence level. Meter's design is pure cosmic horror. She's all writhing tentacles and exposed organs, physically showing the damage from her abandonment. The boss fight reveals she's still functional, but clearly damaged, lashing out at anything that approaches her crater. Her remembrance talks about how she was supposed to be the Greater Will's connection point, the living antenna for divine communication. But the signals stopped and she just kept waiting. The three fingers' origin is even worse. The game heavily implies they're a mutated offspring of Meteor, corrupted by her isolation and despair. They didn't choose to serve the frenzied flame, they became it, transformed by the realization that the Greater Will had abandoned them. The frenzied flame isn't an outer god's plan. It's the neurotic breakdown of divine messengers who couldn't handle being ghosted by their creator. This means every ending guided by the fingers is potentially wrong. The Age of Fracture, where you repair the Elden Ring according to the two fingers' wishes, that's based on thousand-year-old instructions that might not reflect the Greater Will's current priorities. The Frenzied Flame ending, where you burn everything, that's embracing the madness of abandonment. Only Ranni's ending explicitly rejects the fingers' guidance, which might be the only path that isn't built on miscommunication. But here's what keeps me up at night. If Meteor stopped receiving signals, what happened to the Greater Will? Did it die? Move on to another planet? Stop caring about physical reality entirely? The game doesn't say, which means the entire Golden Order might be running on autopilot, enforcing rules from a god that no longer exists or no longer cares. Speaking of things that no longer exist, let's talk about the region From Software decided to literally hide from reality. The Land of Shadow. The Shadow of the Erdtree DLC takes place in the Land of Shadow, a continent-sized region that was somehow separated from the lands between and hidden behind a veil. The game casually mentions this happened ages ago, then refuses to explain how you hide an entire landmass, or why Marika felt it necessary. Getting there requires following Miquella's path through Mohg's palace, which is already suspicious because Miquella's been missing since before the game starts. The Land of Shadow contains Marika's origin story, the shaman village where she came from, the torture her people endured, the climb to godhood that defined her reign. It's also home to Messmer the Impaler, Marika's firstborn son, who she apparently erased from history so thoroughly that none of the base game characters mention him. The separation itself is intentional. Marika didn't just hide this land, she actively removed it from memory and geography. The Scadutree replaces the Erdtree here, showing an alternate version of grace that the Golden Order rejected. All the Hornsent and their divine spiral symbolism exist here, representing the civilization Marika came from and then systematically destroyed. The DLC suggests Marika's ascension to godhood required genocide. She wiped out the Hornsent culture culture that oppressed her people, then hid the evidence behind cosmic censorship. What makes this region fascinating is that it still exists physically. You can walk there, fight bosses there, collect items that prove its reality, but it's separated by more than distance. It's behind a conceptual barrier that prevents the lands between from acknowledging it exists. The game implies this is why the Erdtree's history feels incomplete. Marika literally edited the world's past, removing her own origin story to create the myth of divine right without the messy reality of revolutionary violence. The architecture tells a different story than the Golden Order. Everything here is older, more primal, with that horn-sent spiral imagery that predates Marika's reign. You find giant furnaces where they melted people down in pots, trying to create divine amalgamations. You discover that Marika's people weren't just oppressed, they were raw material for someone else's apotheosis experiments. The Land of Shadow is what Marika rose from, and she separated it not to forget, but to ensure nobody else could use that same violent path to power. Messmer's presence here is the real mystery. He's Marika's firstborn, predating Godwyn and all the Golden lineage, but he got exiled to this hidden realm and tasked with continuing the genocide against the Hornsent. His entire existence is classified information, burning away the last remnants of the old order while Marika builds her new one in the lands between. He's still loyal, still carrying out his mother's ancient orders, completely unaware that she shattered the Elden Ring and ended the system he's killing to protect. The DLC doesn't explain the mechanism of separation. How do you take a landmass and put it behind a veil? Is it dimensional shifting? Collective amnesia enforced by the Elden Ring? Some power Marika gained during her ascension? The game treats it as historical fact without addressing the physics-breaking implications. Now, if Marika could hide entire continents, what else did she erase? Because there's evidence scattered through the DLC that the timeline is more fractured than we thought. Messmer's timeline problem. Messmer the Impaler is introduced in Shadow of the Erdtree as Marika's firstborn son, which should make him older than every other demigod, except that the timeline doesn't work, and the community has been tearing their hair out trying to make it fit. The base game establishes that Godfrey was Marika's first consort, and their children, Godwyn, Morgott, and Mohg, represented the first generation of demigods. Then Marika divorced Godfrey, married herself as Radagon, and had a second generation including Melania and Miquella. Simple family tree, easy to follow. Messmer breaks it completely because he has red hair like Radagon but exists before Godfrey's time, which means either Radagon existed way earlier than the game implies, or Marika had another red-haired partner nobody mentions. The DLC shows Messmer actively fighting the Hornsent during Marika's rise to power. He's her weapon, burning down the old civilization while she ascends to godhood. This places him at the very beginning of the Golden Order, before the Erdtree became dominant, but his design and abilities tie him to fire serpent imagery that doesn't appear anywhere else in Marika's lineage. He's got this base serpent sealed inside him, represented by the abyssal serpent incantations, suggesting his power comes from something outside the Golden Order entirely. Here's where theorists split. One camp says Radagon existed long before his marriage to Marika, possibly as a separate entity she absorbed or partnered with during her ascension. This explains Messmer's red hair and suggests the Marika-Radagon unity happened way earlier than presented. Another camp argues Messmer might not be fully Marika's biological son, instead created through the same divine jar experiments she later weaponized against the Hornsent. His serpent affliction could be a result of imperfect apotheosis, making him powerful but flawed. The game deliberately obscures this. Messmer is never mentioned in the base game, despite being the firstborn. None of the other demigods acknowledge his existence. There are no statues, no items referencing him, nothing in the lands between that proves he existed. Marika erased him from history as thoroughly as she erased the Land of Shadow, which suggests his existence contradicts the official narrative she spent centuries building. What's clear is that Messmer's story predates the Golden Order's public history. He represents Marika's violent origins, the crusade and genocide that made her ascension possible. She couldn't have a son who reminded everyone she wasn't born divine. She took divinity through force and fire, so she hid him in the Land of Shadow, gave him the endless task of purging Hornsent survivors, and let the world forget he existed. The timeline inconsistencies might be intentional. From Software could be showing us that Marika's history is a constructed narrative, not objective truth. The dates don't line up because she rewrote them. The family tree is contradictory because she edited it for divine legitimacy. Messmer exists in the cracks of that edited history, proof that the Golden Order's origin story is propaganda. But if Marika went to this much trouble to hide her firstborn, what else is she hiding about the family? Because there's one demigod whose fate gets weirder the more you investigate. Miquella's true plan. Miquella the Unalloyed is Elden Ring's tragic genius, the demigod who tried to fix everything and ended up making it worse. The base game presents him as a victim, eternally cursed with childhood, kidnapped by Mohg, trapped in a cocoon in some blood-soaked nightmare palace. Then the DLC reveals what he was actually planning, and it's somehow more horrifying than anything Mohg did. Miquella wanted wanted to become a god, but not like Marika. He was designing a new age called the Age of Compassion, where he'd rule with perfect empathy and end all suffering. Noble goal, terrible execution. To achieve godhood, he needed to shed his physical form and his doubts, basically killing parts of himself until only divine purpose remained. The journey through the land of shadow shows this happen. You find his discarded flesh, his love, his fears, each one left behind like snakeskin as he ascends to something beyond human. Here's the nightmare part. His compassion wasn't emotional, it was metaphysical control. Miquella's charm ability makes people worship him involuntarily. His followers aren't devoted by choice, they're mind-controlled into devotion. Every knight serving him, every ally fighting in his name, they're all puppets dancing to his divine charisma. The DLC's final boss is Radon, restored to life and forced into service as Miquella's promised consort, completely overriding his actual will. Miquella's Age of Compassion was going to be universal love enforced through cosmic thought control. The relationship with Radon is particularly twisted. Miquella made a vow with Radon before the Shattering, promising they'd be consort and god together. Radon apparently agreed, but then something happened. The Shattering started. Radon got infected with scarlet rot during his battle with Millennia, and he devolved into a mindless warrior eating corpses on a beach. Most players assumed Millennia's attack was just demigod war stuff. Theories suggest she was acting on Miquella's orders, weakening Radon so he could be killed and then resurrected as a puppet for Miquella's ascension. This would recontextualize the entire base game. Millennia blooming in Kylid and nuking the entire region might not have been collateral damage, but an assassination attempt that failed. Radon survived, broken and feral, but alive enough that Miquella couldn't proceed. That's why the festival happens. Why Jaren gathers warriors to give Radon an honorable death. It's not mercy, it's completing Miquella's plan. Kill Radon so Miquella can resurrect him correctly. The ethical horror is that Miquella genuinely believes he's doing the right thing. He's not a villain in his own story. He's a savior making hard choices. If he has to discard love and doubt to achieve perfect compassion, that's acceptable sacrifice. If he has to mind control everyone into cooperation, that's just efficient peacekeeping. If he has to murder and resurrect his brother-in-law as a cosmic battery, that's what godhood requires. He's become the monster he was trying to prevent, but he shed the self-awareness that would let him recognize it. The DLC boss fight makes this explicit. You face promised consort Radon, with Miquella literally riding him like a puppet, and the entire battle is about stopping this Age of Compassion from manifesting. You're not fighting evil. You're fighting someone who wants to save the world so badly that he'll strip away everyone's free will to do it. It's cosmic horror disguised as beneficence. Now, if Miquella's plan was this elaborate, requiring assassination, resurrection, and dimensional travel, what was he doing for the thousands of years before the Shattering? Because his other experiments are scattered through the game, and they're equally disturbing. The walking mausoleums. The walking mausoleums are those giant stone tortoises wandering around with bells underneath, and they're one of those visual mysteries From Software drops in without context. You can knock them down and use them to duplicate remembrances, but the game doesn't explain what they are, why they exist, or whose corpses are inside. Each mausoleum contains a soulless demigod, not one of the major demigods from the Shattering. These are unnamed children who died without grace, their bodies preserved in these mobile tombs. The bells ring constantly, a funeral dirge that's been going for centuries. The walking itself is ritualistic, these massive constructs endlessly wandering as if searching for something they'll never find. The community connects these to Miquella's experiments with death and resurrection. He was obsessed with breaking the curse of immortality, finding ways to give Godwyn a true death and restore proper mortality to the lands between. The soulless demigods in the mausoleums could be failed attempts at that process. Children who died during Miquella's research into separating soul from body. If he could figure out how Godwyn's soul died while his body lived, maybe he could reverse engineer true death for everyone else. The design is deliberately tragic. These aren't grand monuments. They're walking graves, massive stone shells protecting bodies that can't rest properly. The fact that they're walking suggests the occupants aren't quite dead enough, still animated by some residual force that keeps them mobile. They're stuck between death and undeath, exactly like Godwyn, but contained in portable tombs instead of spreading through the root system. What's strange is the number of them. There are 7 walking mausoleums scattered across the lands between, which means at least 7 demigods died soulless during the same era. That's not random tragedy. That's systematic experimentation. Someone was testing theories about death repeatedly on divine subjects. Miquella's the obvious suspect because his entire character revolves around trying to cure fundamental curses, but the scale suggests this was happening with approval, or at least tolerance, from Marika herself. The bells serve a function beyond ceremony. Bell ringing in From Software games traditionally relates to summoning or containing spirits. These bells might be keeping the soulless bodies from degrading further, creating a stasis that preserves them indefinitely. Or they could be attempting to call back the missing souls, a ritualistic hope that's been ringing unanswered answered for centuries. The duplication mechanic is the weirdest part. Why can these specific tombs duplicate remembrances? Remembrances are crystallized memories of major bosses, essentially soul fragments made physical. The mausoleum's ability to copy them suggests a connection between the soulless demigods and the capacity to manipulate soul memory. Maybe that's what Miquella was researching. If you remove the soul, can you recreate it from memory? Can you print new souls like photocopies? But if Miquella was experimenting on demigod children, who gave him permission? Because that level of systematic research requires resources and authority. Giant skulls in Caelid. There are massive dragon skulls scattered across Caelid, each one the size of a building, and the game offers zero explanation for what they are or how they died. They're just environmental storytelling cranked to 11. Giant monuments to some ancient catastrophe. The skulls are clearly draconic, but way larger than any dragon you fight in the game. Even Greol, the massive dragon mother in Caelid who gives you a ridiculous rune bounty for killing her while she's immobile, is smaller than these skulls suggest. These things were flying mountains, creatures that could have leveled castles just by landing on them, and they're all dead, reduced to bleached bones scattered across Caelid's rot-infested landscape. The location is significant. Caelid is where millennia bloomed, where the scarlet rot turned the entire region into a nightmare of decay and disease. But these skulls predate that catastrophe. They're weathered and ancient, showing centuries of exposure. Whatever killed these dragons happened long before millennia's fight with Radahn, back in an era when creatures this size were apparently normal. Ancient dragon lore suggests these could be from the age before the Erd Tree, when dragons ruled the lands between and the beastmen served them. Placidus Axe, the ancient dragon lord you fight in Fara Mazula, was supposedly an Elden lord before the current system, serving a different outer god. These massive skulls could be from that era, remnants of a dragon civilization that got wiped out when Marika's Golden Order took over. The size implies a power level the current dragons don't possess. Greol is impressive, but stationary, already dying when you find her. The ancient dragons in Fara Mazula are powerful but manageable for a late-game player. These skulls suggest dragons that could have fought demigods as equals, maybe even won. Whatever caused their extinction must have been catastrophic enough to wipe out creatures that could fly and shoot lightning. There's a darker theory. The skulls could be from failed experiments, genetic dead ends in someone's attempt to create or control dragon power. The Lands Between has a documented history of playing God with living creatures. The grafting, the jar experiments, the attempts to create artificial life. Maybe someone tried to supersize dragons for war or worship, and these skulls are the failures, creatures too large to sustain themselves biologically. The silence around them is typical From Software. They're obviously important. You can't miss something that massive while exploring Caelid, but no NPC mentions them. No item describes what happened. No lore entry contextualizes their existence. They're just there, visual proof that something world-ending happened in the past, and everyone's moved on without documenting it. Elden Ring broke every record From Software ever set, and 3 years later, players are still discovering mysteries the developers never solved. Every item description, every cut quest line, every mistranslated ending hides unanswered questions so fundamental that Shadow of the Erd Tree deliberately ignored them. That's why today, I'm breaking down the 12 biggest unsolved mysteries in Elden Ring and everything we actually know about them, starting with the identity nobody can agree on. The Gloam-Eyed Queen. The single most debated character in Elden Ring never appears on screen. Before you dismiss this as typical From Software vagueness, hear me out. The Gloam-Eyed Queen was an Empyrean chosen by the Two Fingers who wielded destined death through black flame and led the Godskin Apostles on a literal god-killing spree across the Lands Between. Maliketh defeated her, but here's where it gets weird. She wasn't killed, she vanished. The Black Flame ritual states she was an Empyrean who raised a dark god with the power to slay gods. The Godslayer's greatsword confirms she controlled the Godskin Apostles before Malekith's defeat. The Godskin swaddling cloth describes her cradling newborn apostles like a mother. Zero explanations for what happened after her defeat. Destined death was sealed after she lost, meaning she couldn't truly die. She just disappears. From every record, 3 theories dominate. First, Melina is the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Her purple, gloam-colored eye and the frenzied flame ending, her promise to deliver destined death, and the Blade of Calling's reference to the road of destined death all connect. Second theory claims she was Hornsent. Since Godskins can assimilate inhuman physiology through crucible magic, the Hornsent practiced. Third theory links her to Placidusax's god who fled before the Erdtree age. But here's the kicker: the putrescent knight, guarding Saint. Trina in the DLC was internally named Knight of the Glowmide Queen before From Software changed it. The entire DLC was the perfect opportunity to answer this. They added zero Glowmide Queen lore. The silence itself is the mystery, and if you think one missing god is disturbing, wait until you hear about the companion who's existed since the beginning but nobody in the game acknowledges. Melina, your constant companion through the entire game, is a ghost nobody else can see, and I can prove it. Zero NPCs in Elden Ring mention Melina by name. Zero NPCs acknowledge her existence. Walk up to any character with Melina standing right there, and they act like you're alone. Her internal game file name is Marika of Daughter, Marika's daughter, yet she has no historical record, no mention in any demigod's lore, and no explanation for why she's spectral. Her own words make this worse. At the Church of Pilgrimage, she says she's searching for her purpose, given to her by her mother inside the Erdtree long ago, for the reason that she yet lives, burned and bodiless. Later, she clarifies her purpose was given by her mother, but now she acts of her own volition. She can read Marika's words at churches. Nobody else in the game has this ability. The shadow of the Erdtree's Messmer's kindling confirms she's Messmer's younger sister. She's a confirmed child of Marika. So why does she not exist in any historical account? Here's where it gets complicated. Melina keeps her left eye sealed with a claw mark tattoo. Birds symbolize death throughout the game via death birds. Ranni keeps her right eye sealed. They're mirror images. In the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending, Melina opens her sealed eye to reveal a purple iris and threatens to deliver you destined death. Purple, gloam-colored, the exact color associated with the Glowmide Queen who wielded destined death before Malekith sealed it. The leading theory connects Melina directly to the Glowmide Queen. Same eye color, same connection to destined death, same maternal link to Marika. But an alternative theory argues she's a fragment of Marika herself, like Radagon is Marika's other half. This explains her ability to read Marika's words and her intimate knowledge of the Erdtree. A third theory suggests Melina and Ranni are two halves of a contingency plan. Melina burns the Erdtree. Ranni establishes the Age of Stars. Both know Torrent. Both are spectral. Neither acknowledges the other exists. Miyazaki stated in a Famitsu interview that Melina has different nuances from Dark Souls Firekeepers, and was designed as a partner on the same level as the protagonist. He has never clarified her identity. The DLC answered Messmer, answered Saint Trina, answered Marika's past. It ignored Melina completely. At least Melina seems benevolent, unlike the demigod who engineered an entire war to become god. Miquella's love, Shadow of the Erdtree, reframed the most beloved character in Elden Ring into something nobody expected, and the evidence is scattered across 13 crosses. Each cross marks where Miquella discarded a part of himself on his path to godhood. The inscriptions read like a horror story. I abandon here the first flesh of my body. I abandon here my doubt and vacillation, and the worst one, I abandon here my love. Sir Ansbach pieces together the full scheme throughout the DLC. Miquella charmed Mog intentionally. The entire community assumed Mog kidnapped and manipulated Miquella backwards. Miquella manipulated Mog, orchestrated his death, and planned to use Mog's body as a vessel for Radagon's soul. The Caelid War where Malenia fought Radagon wasn't about freeing the stars. It was an assassination attempt. Malenia was sent to kill Radagon so his soul would enter the realm of shadow where Miquella could claim it. The devastation of Caelid, the rot consuming an entire region, the suffering of thousands, collateral damage. Saint Trina opposes this plan from the Stone Coffin Fissure. The DLC confirms she's Miquella's other half, using the exact same Japanese term used for Radagon and Marika. She was the part of himself he shed when he abandoned his love. A data-mined fourth cutscene shows Saint Trina saying after Radagon's defeat, "Thank you, finally he will be free." She views stopping Miquella's ascension as liberation. The community is split cleanly. One camp argues Miquella was always manipulative. Griffith parallels from Berserk, engineering the Caelid catastrophe, his planned age of compassion that Ansbach describes as charming the entire world into compliance. Forced compassion isn't compassion. The opposing camp argues he was genuinely good until the shedding corrupted him. Each cross stripped away the qualities that made him kind. The tragedy is his noble goal of ending suffering required becoming inhuman. Cut dialogue reveals his original vision. Now comes the age of our Eden, a 1,000-year voyage guided by compassion. Beginning here, love encompasses all. Whether this is beautiful or terrifying depends entirely on whether you believe discarding your love lets you love everyone equally, or whether it just makes you a monster wearing compassion as a mask. But if you think Miquella's manipulation is dark, wait until you realize his mother may have orchestrated everything from the beginning, including the murder of her own son. Marika's plan. The question of whether Queen Marika planned the shattering or was driven to it by grief is the foundation of Elden Ring's entire narrative, and the evidence for premeditation is disturbing. She exiled Godfrey and his warriors deliberately, stripped their grace with a spoken command. "My lord and thy warriors, I divest each of thee of thy grace." Then she called them back. "Return to the lands between, wage war, and brandish the Elden Ring. Grow strong in the face of death." She engineered the Tarnished's return. The Night of the Black Knives gets worse when you examine who carried it out. Newman women with close ties to Marika herself. That's the exact text from the Black Knife armor. Ranni claims responsibility for orchestrating the event, but she only arranged to die simultaneously so her soul would survive while Godwyn's body lived on. Marika's direct involvement is circumstantial, but heavy. The assassins were her people. The target was her son. The aftermath served her apparent goal of breaking the Golden Order. Marika's hammer provides the most haunting evidence. The scarring and fractures on the surface indicate the hammer was used to shatter the Elden Ring, and in a fit of remorse, to attempt to repair it. But here's where it gets complicated. Was Marika the one who tried to repair it, or was that Radagon, her other self, fighting against her will? Her spoken echo at the Erd Tree answers this directly. "O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me, thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered, both, mine other self." The DLC revealed Marika's childhood in the shaman village. Her people were butchered and stuffed into jars by the Hornsent. She rose to godhood and sent Messmer to exterminate them, a genocide born from personal trauma. This complicates every theory. Was the shattering cosmic strategy, emotional breakdown, or personal revenge against a divine order that once permitted her people's slaughter? The game provides enough evidence for all three readings and confirmation of none. Here's the thing. Marika orchestrated the return of the Tarnished. She spoke the words that stripped and restored their grace. She had the means, motive, and opportunity for her son's assassination. But whether she's a master manipulator playing 4D chess or a broken mother whose grief shattered the world remains the game's central ambiguity. And if Marika's dual nature is confusing, wait until you learn about Radagon, who was somehow a separate person and the same person simultaneously. Radagon is Marika. The game's most famous revelation is delivered through a puzzle, cast law of regression requiring 37 intelligence before a statue of Radagon in the Erd Tree Sanctuary, and it transforms into Queen Marika. The message appears. Radagon is Marika. This is the climax of the Gold Mask questline and the foundation for the Age of Order ending. But the game never explains how. The contradictions are severe. Radagon married Rennala of Korea and fathered 3 children, Radon, Rykard, Ranni, while Marika was simultaneously married to Godfrey and ruling as goddess. They occupied separate physical bodies in separate locations for years, yet they share one body. The final boss encounter begins with Radagon's body cracking apart to reveal the Elden beast within. They were 2 people, then they became one person, except they always were one person. The giant's red braid adds another layer. Every giant is red of hair, and Radagon was said to have despised his own red locks. Perhaps that was a curse of their kind. This links Radagon to the fire giants, an entirely separate lineage from Marika's Newman origins. How can they be the same being if they have different ancestries? Unless Radagon was created from Marika specifically to have red hair, to infiltrate Caria, to father children who would become demigods. The alchemical rebus theory is the most academically supported interpretation. In alchemy, the rebus is a perfect being formed from a white queen and red king, unified by a dragon. Marika, gold and white. Radagon, red. 2 beings merged by the Elden beast, the dragon serpent, to create a transcendent vessel for the Elden Ring. This explains the opposed wills. Marika shatters, Radagon repairs, an inherently unstable union. The Japanese text uses Hanshin for their relationship, half body, other half. The exact same term later applied to Miquella and St. Trina. This suggests splitting is a feature of Empyrean biology rather than a unique event. Empyreans chosen to become gods may naturally fracture into dual beings. Marika and Radagon, Miquella and St. Trina. Potentially Melina and the Glomide Queen. But wait, if Radagon is Marika, and Radagon fathered children with Rennala, while Marika was with Godfrey, were they always one being occupying 2 bodies? Or did they merge later? The game never clarifies. Marika's words suggest they merged after Godfrey's exile. Thought yet to become me, yet to become a god. But cut content and environmental storytelling suggest they were always aspects of the same entity. Nobody knows, and that fundamental uncertainty about the game's central divine figure makes every other mystery worse. At least, Marika and Radagon are gods. The Three Fingers claim to know the truth about creation itself, and their story makes the Greater Will look like a mistake. The Three Fingers. The Frenzied Flame ending offers the most radical cosmological claim in the game. Hayeta delivers it at the Frenzied Flame prescription after consuming yellowing eyeballs for vision. All that there is came from the One Great. Then came fractures and births and souls. But the Greater Will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. And so, what was borrowed must be returned, melted all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again. The symbolism is obvious. 2 fingers plus 3 fingers equals 1 complete hand. The community's most popular theory claims order and chaos were once a single cosmic entity called the One Great that fractured. The Greater Will represents order. The Frenzied Flame represents chaos. Reunification through burning everything would restore the original state. Except the DLC's Remembrance of Métir identifies her as the mother of all 2 fingers and finger creepers, a magnificently gleaming daughter of the Greater Will. The 3 fingers are conspicuously excluded from Meter's lineage. Their origin remains completely separate and unexplained. The merchants add a human dimension to this cosmic horror. The nomadic merchant's finery reveals these merchants once thrived as the Great Caravan, but after being accused of heretical beliefs, their entire clan was rounded up and buried alive far underground. Then they chanted a curse of despair and summoned the flame of frenzy. But the fingerprint stone shield describes the tomb of an ancient god, whose fingerprint imprints were the very seeds from which frenzy first sprouted. The flame existed before the merchant's suffering. They didn't create it, they awakened it. Merchant Kale originally had a full data-mined questline voiced by Nabil Alawahabi, where he traced his people's fate to the subterranean shunning grounds and attempted to embrace the frenzied flame himself. This cut content would have made the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending emotionally resonant rather than mechanically discovered. Instead, we get lore about fictional merchants and a cosmic entity mentioned exclusively by characters under the flame's influence. Here's where it gets complicated. Hayeta consumed Shabriri grapes to gain her vision. Shabriri, the first person afflicted by the frenzied flame, may be puppeting her words. The One Great is mentioned exclusively by characters under the flame's influence. There's zero independent verification. We're trusting the testimony of people driven insane by the thing they're describing. This is perhaps the game's most elegant epistemological trap. The cosmic truth that would justify burning the entire world comes from sources that literally cannot be trusted. The fundamental question isn't whether the Three Fingers are evil, it's whether they're lying, and we have no way to verify their claims about primordial unity, because every source is compromised. But if you think cosmic lies are disturbing, wait until you see what happened to the first demigod who died. His body never stopped growing, and nobody knows why. Godwyn's body, the first demigod murdered during the Night of the Black Knives, presents a uniquely disturbing mystery. Godwyn's soul was destroyed, but his body lived on, and it has been growing ever since. The curse mark of death explains the mechanism. 2 demigods perished at the same time, breaking the curse mark into 2 half-wheels. Rani was the first of the demigods whose flesh perished, while the Prince of Death perished in soul alone. Split death. One demigod's body survives without a soul. The other demigod's soul survives without a body. Godwyn's soulless corpse was buried at the Erd Tree's roots beneath Langdal. It began contaminating the entire root system. His face now appears on crabs near Stormvale Castle. His body in the deep root depths has grown to immense size with a fish-like tail spreading through the underground like a fungal infection. Deathroot, described as a source that gives rise to those who live in death, spread through the underground root network from his burial site. In shadow of the Erd Tree, cadaver surrogates appear in the Scorpion River catacombs. His influence extends even to the sealed land of Shadow. The Golden Epitaph sword contains the most heartbreaking detail, infused with the humble prayer of a young boy. "Oh brother, Lord brother, please die a true death." This is almost certainly Miquella's prayer. The failed eclipse ritual ritual at Castle Sol was an attempt to restore Godwyn's soul to his body. Fia's entire questline revolves around lying with Godwyn to birth the mending rune of the Death Prince, incorporating death back into the Golden Order to give Godwyn and those who live in death legitimacy. But here's what nobody can answer. Is Godwyn conscious? The remembrance of the Lich Dragon describes Fortisax fighting long and hard against the death within its companion, language suggesting Godwyn had a relationship with the dragon, implying some awareness. Why does his body take an aquatic fish-like form? The visual design resembles polypore fungi spreading through a root network, but zero-item descriptions explain the morphology. Most critically, is he still growing? Walk through any underground area and you'll see it. Deathroot corruption spreading, Godwyn's face appearing on creatures that shouldn't have it, his body infecting the Erdtree's entire root system like a cancer. None of the game's endings explicitly address this spreading corruption. You can become Elden Lord, you can burn everything, you can leave with Ranni, you can establish the age of Duskborn. Godwyn keeps growing, his soulless body keeps spreading, and eventually, if this continues, his Deathblight infection will reach every corner of the lands between. The game provides no solution, no cure, no explanation for why a soulless body would continue growing and mutating, just the horrifying certainty that beneath every ending you choose, Godwyn's corpse keeps spreading through the roots. At least, Godwyn is a known entity. The being at the top of Elden Ring's theological hierarchy has never spoken, never appeared, and may have already left. The Greater Will. The entity at the top of Elden Ring's theological hierarchy is defined almost entirely by absence. The Greater Will never speaks, never appears, and is known only through servants and relics. The Elden Star's incantation provides the foundational lore. It is said that long ago, the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. The Elden Beast is described as the vassal beast of the Greater Will and living incarnation of the concept of order. That's it. That's everything the base game tells you about the supreme deity. Here's where it gets complicated. The Two Fingers have been giving guidance to Empyreans for thousands of years. Marika followed their guidance. The Golden Order was built on their interpretation of the Greater Will's desires. But if Matter, their mother, was abandoned and broken long ago, and she kept waiting for messages that never came, what have the Two Fingers actually been communicating? Sir Gideon Ofnir states the Two Fingers were broken long ago. Were they just making it up? Operating on instructions from eons past? Interpreting static from a god that stopped caring? The community debates three positions. First, the Greater Will is an amoral cosmic force like gravity, rather than a sentient god. Its actions are interpreted by followers, rather than consciously directed. Its silence isn't abandonment, but simply its nature. Second, the Greater Will is a manipulative colonizer that arrived in a world with existing gods, dragons, fire giants, the Crucible, and imposed its order by force before losing interest. Third, the Greater Will genuinely abandoned the lands between after the Shattering. The entire Golden Order is a hollow religion maintained by followers operating on instructions from the distant past. The game never resolves whether its highest deity is absent, indifferent, or simply incommunicable. Every character who claims to speak for the Greater Will is demonstrably unreliable. The Two Fingers are broken. Matir was abandoned. The Fingers send you to gather great runes, while Marika's own words carved in churches contradict their guidance. You spend the entire game following the supposed will of a god that may not be listening, may never have cared, or may have left the lands between to rot the moment Marika shattered the Elden Ring. And if a potentially absent god is disturbing, wait until you learn that one of the game's most popular endings was mistranslated, and the real meaning changes everything. Ranni's ending, the Age of Stars, is the most chosen ending, yet a localization error changed its meaning. English says Ranni would keep stars and moon far from the earth, implying cold isolation. Japanese says she'll keep the order itself far away, so that certainties of sight, emotion, faith, and touch become impossibilities. The correction reveals humanistic philosophy. When people directly perceive divine order, it leads to tyranny. By taking her order beyond perception, she grants functional atheism. People live without divine interference. Her dialogue confirms a 1,000-year voyage under the wisdom of the moon, into fear, doubt, and loneliness, as the path stretcheth into darkness. But the dark moon is an outer god. Did she replace one cosmic master with another? The Nox awaited a lord of night who would usher in this age. They prophesied this for millennia. Whether this is freedom or different control depends on interpretation. The mistranslation made it bleak. The correct translation makes it genuinely ambiguous. And before Marika existed, another god fled, leaving an empty throne. Placidus acts as god. Before Marika, Dragon Lord Placidus Axe served as Elden Lord to an unnamed god who abandoned the lands between. Placidus Axe waits in crumbling Pharaoh Missoula at a temporal anomaly, guarding an empty throne outside time. The Elden Ring in Pharaoh Missoula appears in a different configuration than Marika's, possibly containing the Rune of Death in its original position. The Dragon Age predates every other era. Placidus Axe has 2 severed heads on a body designed for 4 or 5. The Ancient Dragon Prayer Book states ancient dragons were lords of the world before the Erd Tree, not servants, lords. Then the god fled. Placidus Axe remained. The Dragon Lord's remembrance says in the age before the Erd Tree, Placidus Axe was Elden Lord, but his god fled, and the seat has long been vacant. No explanation why. Dragon finger crowns have 8 prongs mirroring Meter's 8 fingers, connecting dragons to the Greater Will's earliest influence. The leading theory connects this god to the Glomide Queen. If Pharaoh Missoula's Elden Ring contained death, and the queen controlled destined death, she may have been the god of a pre-Erd Tree era. But this is speculative. An entire theological era exists as a gap. A god powerful enough to make a 5-headed dragon their Elden Lord vanished with 0 answers. At least, that's ancient history. The next problem makes 0 chronological sense. Mesmer and the Land of Shadow. The DLC introduced a timeline paradox. Mesmer is Marika's son with red hair, suggesting Radagon as father. But Radagon met Marika after Godfrey's exile. Radagon married Renala, fathered 3 children, then became Marika's consort. Yet Mesmer predates other demigods and was sent to the Land of Shadow before the Shattering, possibly before everything. If Marika and Radagon were always one being, she could have birthed Mesmer from herself. But this contradicts Radagon as a separate person. Mesmer's kindling confirms he bore a vision of fire like his younger sister, linking him to Melina. The timeline doesn't work. The Land of Shadow operates under unexplained rules. It was sealed away by Marika to hide her past. The Skagit Tree is literally the shadow of the Erd Tree, born of dark notions that bear no sense of order. Community analysis suggests it grew from Marika's negative emotions when she created the Erd Tree. Her psychological shadow made arboreal, but the realm functions as afterlife. The suppressing pillar states all manners of death wash up here. Death accumulates. The DLC map fits over the base game's central region, suggesting the same physical space in a different layer. How did Marika separate an entire landmass into a shadow dimension? Mesmer's dying words curse Marika. Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light? He understood something about his imprisonment the player never learns. An entire crusade involving Marika's child was deleted from history, and an entire religion disappeared, leaving only giant death birds. The twin bird, an entire pre-Erd Tree religion centered on death and cremation, is referenced only through items and enemies. Death birds, giant undead birds with human corpses, are remnants. The death ritual spear describes priests who became guardians through the rite of death, an oath sworn to distant resurrection. The twin bird is mother of all death birds and envoy of an outer god. This unnamed death outer god presided over a system where bodies were cremated with ghost flame and resurrection achieved through ritual. Helfen's steeple describes lamplight similar to grace, only seen by those who met death in battle, a parallel death-grace system predating the Erd Tree entirely. The twin bird never appears. The horn scent kept grave birds, confirming this religion was widespread before Marika suppressed it. The death outer god is never named. Ghost flame is cold and star-colored, different from black flame or golden flames. 3 separate death systems exist. Destined death wielded by the Glomide Queen, ghost flame wielded by the ancient deathbird civilization, and those who live in death from Godwyn's corruption. Combined with the Glomide Queen and Godwyn, there may be unified death mythology beneath the game, but From Software left it as archaeology. The twin bird simply doesn't exist, despite being referenced. The priests are all dead with no explanation if resurrection worked. The entire faith is extinct, with 0 survivors. From hidden bosses that 99% of players never find to the one secret Miyazaki swore nobody discovered, these are the biggest secrets in Elden Ring. Placidus Axe Warp. Farah Missoula floats in a storm outside time. You've fought gargoyles, you've dodged lightning, you're thinking you've cleared the place. Then someone on Reddit posts, "Try lying down in this specific crater," and suddenly you're warping backwards through time to fight a two-headed dragon lord who was the original Elden Lord before the Erd Tree even existed. Dragon Lord Placidusax doesn't get a cutscene entrance, doesn't get a boss arena you walk into. You have to perform a gesture in a random spot and trust that From Software coded something there. The fight itself is pure chaos laser beams, teleportation, a moveset that makes Millennia look like a tutorial boss. And the lore drop? This guy ruled before the Golden Order, before Marika, before everything you thought mattered. The dragons had their own age, their own Elden Lord, and it all got erased when the Erd Tree showed up. The crazy part is, how many players never find this? You can beat the game 10 times, finish every questline, and never know Placidusax exists because you didn't think to take a nap in a magic crater. From Software hid one of the hardest boss fights behind the most random gesture in the game and didn't tell anyone. And that's not even the strangest part, because if Placidusax ruled before the Erd Tree, where did the Erd Tree come from? And why does the game never explain how the Golden Order erased an entire civilization? That answer's coming. But first, let's talk about the secret Miyazaki claimed broke the internet: the Candletree Shield. For 2 years, players searched. Miyazaki said in a 2024 interview that a small element remained undiscovered, and the entire community lost their minds trying to find it. Sage's Cave in Altus Plateau. Illusory wall. Candletree wooden shield sitting in a chest like it's not important. The design shows a tree on fire, branches spreading in a very specific pattern. Nobody cared. It was a shield with mediocre stats in a game where shields are for people who hate fun. Then Shadow of the Erd Tree dropped in June 2024, and the very first trailer showed Messmer's symbol, a tree on fire with branches spreading in that exact same pattern. The shield wasn't random loot. It was a 2-year-long teaser for DLC content hidden in the base game since launch. Miyazaki literally spoiled his own expansion, and nobody noticed because we were too busy hitting every wall in the game looking for secrets. The shield itself does nothing special. Doesn't unlock quest lines, doesn't have hidden effects. It's just From Software proving they can plant hints in plain sight and watch us walk past them for 24 months straight. Peak trolling. But here's where it gets darker. If From Software planted a 2-year teaser in the base game, what else are they hiding? What if there's another shield, another item, another throwaway piece of loot that won't make sense until DLC 2 drops? And more importantly, what if some secrets are designed to never be found? Keep that paranoia. You'll need it. Miquella's divestment. Shadow of the Erd Tree rewrites what you thought you knew about Miquella, the kindest demigod who everyone trusted. Turns out Miquella shed his body piece by piece across the realm of Shadow, leaving behind crosses marking where he abandoned his doubts, his love, his fear. Balurat has a secret room you'd never find without guides, and inside is a cross showing where Miquella ditched his flesh. Each cross ties to his transformation into a god, except he's not becoming divine through worship or power. He's doing it by cutting away everything that made him mortal. His charm, the thing that made everyone love him unconditionally, was part of what he abandoned. Meaning, every NPC who talks about Miquella with reverence, they're not following him out of genuine belief. They're following magical compulsion. The divestment crosses reframe the entire DLC. You're not chasing a benevolent god trying to save the world. You're tracking a manipulator who weaponized love itself and then threw it away when it stopped being useful. The secret rooms, the hidden crosses, they're not Easter eggs. They're evidence of premeditated transformation into something that doesn't need humanity anymore. But Miquella's charm raises a question nobody wants to answer. Who else fell under his spell? Because if Miquella could make entire armies worship him without knowing why, what if some of the NPCs you trust are still charmed? What if you're charmed and don't know it? The game never tells you when the charm breaks. And that's the point. Now let's talk about something growing where it shouldn't. Godwyn's death route. You fight crabs. Normal Elden Ring activity. Then you look closer and realize the crab has a human face embedded in its shell, Godwyn's face. Godwyn died in soul only during the Night of Black Knives, but his body kept living, spreading deathroot corruption across the lands between like cancer. His mutated face appears on crabs, trees, ruins, everything touched by undeath. It's a systematic infection showing how Godwyn's immortal body refuses to stop growing even though his soul is gone. The Prince of Death is a literal description of what he became, a body without a soul that just keeps spreading, keeps mutating, keeps putting its face on wildlife like some kind of cosmic branding exercise. The creepiest part is how subtle it is. You can miss it completely if you're not paying attention to enemy designs. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's Godwin's flesh puppeteering a crab. That's Godwin's body forming a second nervous system under the castle. But Godwin's infection reveals something worse than death. It reveals immortality without consciousness is the real horror, because if Godwin's body is still alive but his soul is dead, is he suffering? Does his corpse know it's spreading? Or is he trapped in a state worse than death, aware but unable to stop? The game never answers this, and maybe that's crueler than any boss fight. Now let's talk about shortcuts that break progression. Deep Root Depths, Path, Lindell Sewers. You're fighting omens, dodging madness, having a terrible time. Then you hit a wall. It disappears. You hit another wall behind the first wall. That disappears too. Suddenly, you're in Deep Root Depths, a massive underground area with its own bosses and quest lines, completely bypassing the need to fight Starscourge Radon. Fa's quest, which normally requires beating one of the hardest bosses in the game, now opens up at any point you can reach the capital. The double illusory wall isn't marked, isn't hinted at, isn't telegraphed in any way. It's just there, waiting for you to bonk the right stone twice. This one secret turns the entire progression curve on its head. You can reach endgame content in the early mid-game just by knowing where to punch. From Software did this on purpose. They built a 40-hour critical path, then hit a shortcut that cuts it in half. The message is clear exploration matters more than linear progression. If you're smart enough to find the path, you deserve the rewards. But here's the real question. How many players beat the game the right way when the wrong way is faster? From Software built a linear path, then hit a shortcut that makes half the game optional. They're not punishing sequence breaking, they're encouraging it. And if they encourage it here, what other progression skips exist that nobody's documented yet? That answer involves enemies that aren't what they seem. Transformed enemies. You see a pot, a barrel, a normal-looking enemy just vibing. You walk past because why wouldn't you? Then on your 8th playthrough, you accidentally roll into it, and it explodes into a horrifying monster that drops a larval tear, the rarest item in the game. Transformed enemies hide in plain sight across the entire map, 7 different variants disguised as harmless objects or weak mobs. They don't attack first. They don't give visual cues. They just sit there waiting for you to get close enough, then reveal their true form and try to kill you. The larval teardrop is payment for paranoia. From Software rewards you for attacking everything, for trusting nothing, for treating every pot like it might be a mimic even though mimics aren't in this game. This mechanic does something worse than train paranoia. It rewards it, because once you know transformed enemies exist, you can't trust anything. That barrel could be lethal. That weak soldier might be hiding a larval tear. From Software turned the entire game world into a trust exercise where the correct answer is always trust nothing. And that philosophy extends to mechanics that literally pay you more for overkill. Overkill mechanic. You one-shot an enemy. Normal Souls behavior. Except you get 20% more runes than you should have. Turns out if you overkill an enemy, deal 150% or more of their total HP in a single hit, the game rewards you with bonus runes. It's not explained anywhere. No tutorial, no item description, no NPC dialogue. Just a hidden multiplier that's been in the game since launch, waiting for players to notice their rune counts didn't match their expectations. The mechanic encourages glass cannon builds, rewards over-leveling, and turns farming into a math problem where you're calculating exactly how much damage you need to trigger the threshold. And nobody told you it existed. This is From Software's design philosophy in one mechanic. They code entire systems, hide them completely, and trust that someone will eventually notice the numbers don't add up. The overkill bonus is a 20% damage tax on players who don't optimize. And From Software never told you it existed. So here's the question. How many other invisible multipliers are affecting your playthrough right now? How many hidden bonuses are you missing because you don't one-shot enemies? The game is rewarding behavior you didn't know was optimal. And that same philosophy extends to DLC fragments hidden behind jumps you're not supposed to make. Shadowkeep platforming. Shadowkeep in the DLC is a castle. You explore rooms, fight knights, standard Souls castle behavior, then you notice ledges, gaps between buildings, places that look like you could jump to them if you really commit. You make the leap, land on a hidden platform, and find a chalice containing 5 Scadutree fragments, the most valuable upgrade material in the entire expansion. The platforming section isn't telegraphed. No glowing items, no messages, just architectural design that implies you could go here if you're brave enough. Commander Gaius as a boss ties to this area, but the real reward is the fragments, which boost your damage and defense in the realm of Shadow by a massive amount. Finding this early turns the DLC from brutally hard to merely challenging. The secret tests your spatial awareness and willingness to experiment with traversal. From Software designed an entire vertical maze and hid the best loot at the bottom, betting that most players wouldn't think to jump off the main path. They were right, but the Shadowkeep platforming reveals how From Software thinks about level design. If they're hiding massive upgrades behind precision jumps in a DLC most players will never complete, what does that say about their priorities? It's not about everyone seeing everything, it's about rewarding the obsessive, the explorers, the people who look at a castle and think, I bet I can break this. But Shadow Keep's platforming reveals something about From Software's priorities. They'd rather hide essential upgrades behind precision jumps than make them accessible, because those 5 Scadutree fragments could mean the difference between beating the DLC or quitting, and From Software hid them where most players will never look. That's not bad design. It's gatekeeping by skill. And that same gatekeeping philosophy extends to items hidden in places you'd never shoot. Bell-bearing pots. You're exploring the DLC wilderness. You see a pot hanging from a tree branch, swaying in the wind. Most players ignore it. It's decoration, except if you shoot it with an arrow, it breaks open and a bell bearing falls out of items that permanently expand merchant inventories. There are multiple pots scattered across the realm of Shadow, each containing different bearings, and every single one is missable because shooting hanging pottery isn't intuitive gameplay. You have to actively think, what if that pot I can barely see at the edge of render distance is important? And then waste an arrow testing your theory. The reward is vendors who suddenly sell upgrade materials you'd otherwise have to farm for hours. This secret is pure From Software trolling. They put progression items in breakable decorations and trusted that nobody would systematically shoot every pot in the game. And they were mostly right. Guides had to document pot locations because finding them organically is basically impossible. But the bell-bearing pots raise a bigger question. If From Software hid essential merchant upgrades in random pots, what other crucial items are hidden in places we'd never think to check? What if there's a pot somewhere that unlocks an entire questline and nobody's found it yet? That's the secret working as designed. But bell-bearing pots prove From Software will hide essential merchant upgrades anywhere. Literally anywhere. And if they'll put progression items in random hanging pots, what's stopping them from hiding entire questlines in breakable environmental objects? What if there's a pot that unlocks a secret ending and nobody's found it because shooting random decorations seems insane? Midra boss fight, Abyssal Woods, the scariest area in Elden Ring, full of madness and death and things that kill you by looking at you. Midra, Lord of Frenzied Flame, is hidden at the end of a multi-step puzzle that requires navigating this nightmare zone perfectly. He's an optional boss that most players miss entirely, because getting to him means surviving an area designed to make you quit. The fight itself is spectacular frenzied flame attacks, madness buildup, a moveset that punishes hesitation. And the remembrance you get is one of the most powerful in the game, both for the weapon it crafts and the lore it reveals about the Three Fingers' true nature. Midra is the secret boss, representing the absolute peak of content you'll never see unless you're determined to see everything. From Software locked their best DLC boss behind their worst area on purpose. They wanted Midra to feel earned, to be a reward for players willing to push through genuine horror to reach him. But Midra's placement reveals something critical about DLC design. Shadow of the Erdtree is about adding content that feels special, because so few people reach it. The entire expansion is built on secrets layered on secrets, with Midra at the center like a test of dedication. And if you can beat him, you've earned something most players never will. But Midra's placement reveals From Software's endgame. Content isn't for everyone anymore. Shadow of the Erdtree is designed for players who beat the base game and wanted more secrets, more obscurity, more reasons to explore. Midra is the reward for that dedication, a boss so hidden that finding him feels like winning a separate game. And that philosophy extends to mechanics that let you duplicate your victories, if you know where to look. If you are enjoying the breakdown so far and don't want to miss out on any new releases, smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. Remembrance Coffins. You beat a major DLC boss. Get their remembrance. Think you're done. Then you find a coffin in a hidden location. You climb in. The game duplicates your remembrance, letting you craft both boss weapons instead of choosing one. There are 3 coffins total in Shadow of the Erdtree Ria's Cliffs, Scataview, and one more spot that requires platforming to reach. Each coffin works only once, meaning you have to choose which remembrances to duplicate carefully. It's walking mausoleums from the base game, but better, except they're hidden behind exploration challenges that make mausoleums look easy. The coffins don't explain themselves, don't have markers, don't appear on maps. You just have to know they exist and remember where they are. This is From Software saying, we know you want both boss weapons, so we hid the solution in 3 places you'll probably never find. It's generous and cruel simultaneously, which is basically their motto. But Remembrance Coffins reveal a design pattern that runs through the entire game. From Software believe in making you work for every advantage, every shortcut, every quality of life feature. And they're right to do it, because finding a coffin feels infinitely better than having the game point you toward it. But Remembrance Coffins reveal the core of From Software's design. They'd rather make you work for convenience than give it freely. Painting hunts. You find a painting, look at it, get a vague sense of where the artist stood. Then you're supposed to go to that exact location and find a ghost who gives you an item. 8 paintings total between base game and DLC. Some reward weapons, some talismans, some just lore. The Spiral Tree seal in the DLC is locked behind a painting puzzle that requires you to remember what a specific tower looked like from a specific angle. Flightless Bird painting points to a spot in Lernia that's completely unmarked. Domain of Dragons sends you to Altus Plateau for the Rock Heart. Every painting is a treasure hunt, with minimal clues, testing your memory and observational skills. The ghosts don't move, don't trigger quests. They just hand you an item and disappear. Pure exploration for exploration's sake. From Software built an entire art gallery system and made it optional collectible content. You can beat the game never knowing paintings do anything. But painting hunts reveal how From Software thinks about rewards. They're not about giving you the best gear, they're about making you feel smart for solving environmental puzzles. The items are secondary to the satisfaction of connecting a painting to a location and being right. That dopamine hit is what keeps players exploring long after they've finished the main story. And that philosophy extends to mechanics that affect exploration itself, like Spirit Ashes that have hidden behaviors you'd never expect. Spirit Ash, secrets. You summon Latenna. She sits there shooting arrows. Standard ranged support behavior. Except if you summon her near Albinoric wolves, she mounts one and becomes mobile, completely changing how she functions in combat. This isn't explained. No item description mentions it. You just have to summon her in the right place and watch it happen. Other Spirit Ashes have hidden interactions too. Some cower near dragons. Some buff each other if you summon multiple. Some have behaviors that only trigger under specific conditions. The game expects you to experiment, to try every Ash in every situation, to discover mechanics through play rather than reading wikis. This approach to Spirit Ashes mirrors how From Software designs everything. Depth exists in layers. Surface-level mechanics are functional, but the real power comes from understanding interactions the game never tells you about. But Spirit Ash secrets prove something crucial about From Software's trust in players. They code these interactions knowing most people will never see them. They're fine with that. The discovery is the point, not universal knowledge. And that philosophy culminates in secrets that affect the entire game world, like weather patterns that change how you play. Let's talk about rain that makes you rich. Golden Rain. Night falls. You're exploring. Suddenly enemies start glowing gold and drop way more runes than normal. Golden Rain events trigger randomly, turning standard farming into exponential gains if you're in the right place at the right time. The effect lasts until dawn, giving you a limited window to exploit it. No warning, no announcement, just a weather pattern that multiplies your rewards. Combined with gold pickled foul foot consumables, you can turn a 10-minute farming session into enough runes to level up multiple times. The game doesn't tell you this exists. You just have to notice enemies glowing and realize something changed. From Software hit a farming buff in a weather system and trusted that players would figure it out. They were right, but Golden Rain reveals how From Software thinks about player time. They don't want you grinding for hours. They want you exploring, discovering, experimenting. The rain is a reward for being in the world, for playing naturally instead of optimizing. It's generosity disguised as random chance, and that same philosophy extends to areas that exist purely for atmosphere, like villages full of friendly monsters. Jarburg. Mintgelmeir has a lift. You use a medallion. It takes you to Jarburg, a village populated entirely by living jars who just want to exist peacefully. No bosses, no loot worth mentioning, just a safe space in a game that usually wants you dead. The jars have dialogue, questlines, personalities. Dialos's quest culminates here, giving narrative weight to what could have been a joke location. But Jarburg's real purpose is atmosphere. It's From Software proving they can build areas that aren't about challenge, that exist purely to make the world feel lived in and strange. The jars are people. They're not enemies. And visiting them feels like discovering something precious in a game that usually traffics in misery. Jarburg is hidden behind the assumption that every area must have combat. Players skip it because they expect another boss fight and don't understand why From Software would waste development time on peaceful content. But that's exactly why Jarburg matters. It subverts expectations, rewards curiosity, and reminds you that the lands between has more going on than endless boss rushes. And that philosophy of subversion extends to entire secret areas that rewrite progression completely. Let's talk about Blood Palaces you can reach way too early. Mogwyn Palace. Consecrated Snowfield is an endgame area. Getting there requires multiple quest lines, late-game access, serious commitment, or you get Pureblood Knight's medal from Varus Quest and teleport straight to Mogwyn Palace from anywhere, skipping 30 hours of content. The palace is full of blood cultists, rivers of blood everywhere, and Moog himself waiting at the end. But more importantly, it's the best rune farming location in the entire game. the bird that walks off a cliff for 11,000 runes. The sleeping Albinoryx, worth thousands each, are all accessible as soon as you complete Vera's quest, which you can do in the first few hours. Early access to Mogwin turns the difficulty curve into a joke. You can overlevel before Godric. From Software put their best farming spot behind a medallion you get early, knowing players would exploit it. They don't care. If you're smart enough to find it, you earn the advantage. But Mogwin Palace reveals From Software's philosophy on sequence breaking. They don't lock content behind level requirements, they hide it, and trust that finding it makes you feel clever enough to deserve the rewards. And that trust extends to entire DLC areas that most players never reach, like zones that require specific gestures to access. The Hinterlands. Shadowkeep has rooms. Standard castle exploration. Then you find a spot where you can use the "Oh Mother" gesture. A secret wall opens. Suddenly you're in the Hinterlands, an entire hidden area with its own bosses, quests, and lore. Ymir's questline culminates here, revealing secrets about the greater will and the fingers that manipulate the world. The area is multiple zones with unique enemies and environmental storytelling, and you'd never find it without a guide because using specific gestures in specific locations isn't intuitive gameplay. From Software coded an entire region and locked it behind a gesture input most players don't experiment with. The Hinterlands represents From Software at peak confidence. They built substantial content, hid it completely, and assumed someone would eventually figure it out through trial and error. But the Hinterlands reveal something crucial about DLC design. Shadow of the Erdtree is the Elden Ring for people who already beat Elden Ring and want even more obscure secrets. The entire expansion assumes you're comfortable with From Software's language, that you'll try weird things in weird places just to see what happens. And if you do, you get entire areas as rewards. That same philosophy extends to boss fights hidden behind environmental puzzles. Charo's Grave, Skadjuvu in the DLC. There's a dragon. Most players don't know this because Ride the Dragon isn't a button prompt that appears. You just have to try it, and if you do, the dragon takes you to Charo's hidden grave, where the Putrescence Knight waits. The boss drops unique gear and contributes to DLC completion, but getting there requires figuring out that From Software hid a dragon taxi service in their expansion. The grave itself is a full boss arena, not a quick encounter. From Software built an entire fight and locked it behind "try to mount the dragon," which is a sentence that sounds ridiculous until you've played enough Souls games to know that ridiculous is standard operating procedure. Charo's grave is From Software saying, "We assume you'll try everything, so we coded for that." They're right to assume it, because the community has learned that nothing is just scenery. But this secret reveals how much trust From Software has in their audience. They don't need to explain dragon mounting because they know players will experiment. They don't need tutorials because the community shares discoveries faster than any guide could document them. And that trust pays off in player engagement that lasts years. Speaking of lasting engagement, let's talk about the secret that ties everything together. The Medr connection, Cathedral of Manus. Medr, hidden deep in the DLC. You complete Ymir's quest. Suddenly you're fighting Medr, Mother of Fingers. She's the source of the two fingers, the beings who've been guiding you since the tutorial. Turns out the fingers are children of an alien entity that crash-landed in the lands between and started manipulating civilizations. The greater will is a force so distant that its messengers are making up orders based on broken communications. Medr reveals that every quest given by the fingers, every divine guidance, was improvised by creatures that lost contact with their actual god centuries ago. You've been following false prophets who genuinely believe they're delivering truth. This one secret recontextualizes the entire game. Every finger you trusted, every maiden who spoke for the greater will, they were all following instructions from a mother creature who barely understands what she's doing. And that's why Medr is the ultimate Elden Ring secret. She exposes that the entire religious framework of the lands between is a cosmic accident. From Software built 200 hours of lore around Faith, then hid the Faith is a lie boss behind multiple questlines most players never complete. From daggers hidden behind invisible walls to shields that require solving paintings most players forget about, these are the most secret items in Elden Ring that will change how you play the game. Golden Scarab. This talisman boosts your rune acquisition by 20%, which sounds boring until you realize it's the difference between grinding for 3 hours or 1 hour to level up in late game. The Golden Scarab lives in the abandoned cave in Caelid, which is already a red flag because Caelid is where Joy goes to die. Getting this thing requires you to defeat 2 clean rot knights at the same time in a cramped cave where your camera has a personal vendetta against you. These knights hit like trucks, inflict scarlet rot, and love to combo you into oblivion while their buddy backstabs you from across the room. It's peak From Software Software design putting one of the most useful items in the game behind a fight that makes you question your life choices. But once you have it, every rune you earn gets that 20% bump, which means faster leveling, more smithing stones, and less time farming those albinorics on the cliff. The community calls this the rune farmer's best friend, and they're not wrong. Pair it with a gold pickled foul foot, and you're basically printing runes. This item has over 10 million views across farming guides, which tells you everything about how essential it is for anyone who doesn't want to spend their entire playthrough underleveled and crying. But rune farming was just the surface. What From Software hid next would make completionists question their sanity, and the community still debates if it was genius or cruelty. Silver Scarab. If the golden scarab is about getting more runes, the silver scarab is about getting more stuff. This talisman increases item discovery by 75 points, making rare drops actually drop instead of mocking you for 40 attempts. It's hidden in the hidden path to the Haligtree, which is already a nightmare location that requires you to navigate invisible bridges over a bottomless pit. The path to this thing involves walking on air, breaking illusory walls, and praying you don't accidentally roll off into the void because your depth perception failed you. From Software designed this area specifically to punish players who don't obsessively tap walls and inch forward like they're defusing a bomb. But the payoff is worth 75 item discovery means farming for rare armor sets, weapons, and materials becomes significantly less painful. You want that Banished Knight chest piece? Silver Scarab. Need a specific Ash of War to drop? Silver Scarab. The community nicknamed this the Discovery Beetle because of its scarab design, and it's become essential for completionists who want every piece of gear without losing their sanity. The fact that it's hidden behind invisible walkways and secret walls is peak Souls logic. You can see why speedrunners memorize this path frame perfect, while casual players just look up the route and call it a day. Discovery mechanics were generous compared to what came next, because From Software was about to hide their best faith weapon behind something so random, you'd think they were trolling. Blade of Calling. This is a faith-scaling dagger that looks like the Black Knife weapons, but with golden holy energy instead of destined death. It's hidden in the Forbidden Lands, which you reach late game, and the acquisition method is so stupid it's almost genius. You have to ride an elevator down, then jump off mid-descent onto a hidden ledge that you'd never notice unless someone told you it existed. The Blade of Calling has the Blade of Gold skill, which launches a holy projectile that tracks enemies and deals solid damage for a dagger. It's perfect for faith builds that want a fast weapon with range options, and the weapon art scales with your incantation power. Lore-wise, this connects to Melina and the Black Knife assassins, fitting into the broader narrative about destined death and the Golden Order's secrets. The fact that From Software hid this behind a random elevator jump with no hints or clues is textbook Miyazaki. You either find it by accident, watch a guide, or miss it entirely across multiple playthroughs. But here's the thing, if faith builds needed a holy dagger this badly, why hide it in the most random spot in the game? Keep that question in mind, because the answer isn't what you think. That elevator trick was child's play. The DLC introduced something stranger, a weapon that doesn't just kill enemies, it erases them from reality entirely, and the way you find it proves From Software learned nothing about mercy. Cinquedea. This dagger boosts bestial incantations by 20%, which makes it essential for any faith build focusing on Garank's beast spells. The Cinquedea is hidden behind the bestial sanctum in Dragon Barrow, Kylid, requiring you to jump down a series of routes and platforms that most players assume lead nowhere. The weapon scales to A in faith at max upgrade and has solid physical damage for a dagger. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, subscribe now. The 20% boost to beast incantations means spells like Stone of Garank and Bestial Sling hit significantly harder, turning a niche build into something genuinely powerful. Visually, the dagger has claw-like engravings that match the Beastman aesthetic, tying it into the game's lore about Farah Mazula and the Beast Priests. About 40% of faith players in the community use this weapon according to build trackers, which shows its importance for that playstyle. The acquisition method is pure From Software hiding essential gear behind jumps that look suicidal, but are actually safe if you trust the process. Casual players miss this entirely because who jumps off cliffs behind a building for fun? But that's the whole point. From Software wants you to explore every ledge, every corner, every suspicious gap in the world geometry. They weaponized curiosity itself. Beast builds got their toy. But what if I told you there's an item that makes one of the game's hardest bosses completely trivial? Most players never find it because From Software buried it behind a questline that punishes you for breathing wrong. Blasphemous Claw. This item is stupid good against Malekith and absolutely useless everywhere else, which makes it the ultimate situational secret. The Blasphemous Claw lets you parry Malekith's golden blade attacks, staggering him and opening him up for criticals. You get it by defeating Recusant Bernal when he invades you in crumbling Farah Mazula, which only happens if you've progressed his questline correctly. The fight against Bernal is tough because he uses the Blasphemous Blade's weapon art, which heals him while damaging you. But once you kill him, you get this claw, and suddenly one of the game's hardest bosses becomes manageable. Parrying Malekith feels incredible because his attacks are so aggressive and overwhelming that turning them against him is pure satisfaction. The community calls this Malekith's Bane because it trivializes the fight if you learn the timing. About 25% of endgame players use this according to boss strategy polls, with most opting for the parry route instead of traditional dodging. The lore connection ties this item to Rykard and the Blasphemous Legacy, suggesting that certain weapons were designed specifically to counter the Golden Order's champions. From Software hid this behind an invasion that many players miss entirely because Bernal's quest is easy to screw up. You have to talk to him multiple times, progress specific areas, and then look for his invasion sign in Farum Azula. Miss any of those steps and you're fighting Malekith the hard way. Boss counters are one thing, but From Software also hid an entire weapon category behind fake walls, because apparently finding the boss wasn't hard enough. Crystal Spear. This sorcery lets you hurl a crystal spear projectile that pierces and explodes on impact. It's hidden in Celia Hideaway in Kylid, behind an illusory wall that you'd never find unless you were either incredibly thorough or following a guide. The crystal spear works great for intelligence builds that want a ranged option, piercing multiple foes with solid damage. The glowing blue aesthetic fits perfectly with crystal sorcery builds, and the weapon has decent scaling for a throwable. From Software loves hiding weapons like this in random caves behind fake walls, testing players' willingness to smack every surface in the game. The Celia Hideaway itself is easy to miss because it's tucked away in northern Kylid, and the illusory wall blends perfectly with the cave geometry. Players who do find it feel smart for about 10 seconds before realizing they probably missed 50 other secrets just like it. The question is, if intelligence builds needed a throwable weapon this specific, why not make it more obvious? Because From Software wanted to see who was paying attention. Harp Bow. This bow shoots arrows that emit musical notes on impact, which sounds gimmicky until you realize it's actually a solid weapon for dexterity ranged builds. You get the Harp Bow by solving the champion's song painting puzzle in Altus Plateau, which requires finding a painting, figuring out the location it depicts, and traveling there to claim the reward. The painting system in Elden Ring is a pure environmental storytelling. Each painting shows a specific vista, and you have to match it to a real location in the game world. The champion's song painting depicts a spot in the mountaintops of the Giants, and when you find it, the Harp Bow spawns there as a ghostly reward. The weapon itself has good dexterity scaling and decent damage, but the real appeal is the aesthetic. Firing musical arrows at enemies is just fun, and the sound design makes each shot feel unique. About 30% of dexterity players use this bow according to weapon popularity data, mostly for its novelty and solid performance. From Software hid this behind a puzzle that requires exploration, memory, and pattern recognition, skills that define the Souls experience. The painting system rewards players who actually look at the world instead of just sprinting through it, but painting puzzles were just the warm-up. What comes next is where From Software started hiding entire boss fights behind secrets. Paintings were just reconnaissance. The DLC took it further, hiding consumables that literally transform you into mythical creatures, and most players sprint right past them. Rockheart. This DLC consumable transforms you into a dragon, enhancing your breath attacks and giving you temporary draconic power. You get it by solving the Domain of Dragons painting in the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion, which requires finding the painting and then traveling to Jagged Peak to claim the reward. The Rockheart transformation lasts for a limited time but significantly boosts Dragon Communion incantations, making spells like Dragonfire and Rotten Breath deal massive damage. The item ties into the DLC's expanded dragon lore, connecting to Baal and the ancient dragon war that predates the Erdtree. Visually, using the Rockheart gives your character a draconic appearance with glowing scales and enhanced breath effects. Only about 15% of DLC players have found this according to completion track, which makes it one of the rarer secrets. The Domain of Dragons painting is easy to miss because Jagged Peak is an optional area that many players skip or rush through. From Software designed this specifically for lore enthusiasts and completionists who want to experience every piece of the expansion's mythology. The transformation mechanic itself is unique to the DLC, showing how the developers expanded on existing dragon themes from the base game. The question is, if dragon builds needed this power boost, why lock it behind a painting puzzle in an optional area? Because From Software respects players who dig deep. Dragon transformations sound powerful, but what if you needed perfect defense instead? From Software hid that too, behind a puzzle most players start but never finish. Serpent Crest Shield. This shield blocks poison buildup and boosts fire resistance, making it perfect for areas like the Scarlet Rot swamps or fire giant fights. You get it by solving the incursion painting in Gravesite Plain, which is one of the DLC's painting puzzles that most players overlook. The Serpent Crest Shield has solid defensive stats and medium weight, fitting into most builds without over-encumbering your character. The poison immunity is clutch for Lake of Rot or Kylid exploration, where rot buildup can drain your health faster than you can chug flasks. Fire resistance makes this useful against fire-based bosses and enemies, reducing chip damage from flame attacks. The serpent design connects to the DLC's expanded lore about ancient serpents and their connection to the Crucible. About 20% of DLC players use this shield according to equipment tracking, mostly for its utility in specific areas. The incursion painting is hidden in an early DLC zone, which means many players players find the painting but forget to solve it before moving on. From Software placed this shield reward in a location that mirrors the painting's depiction, rewarding players who remember and return. But here's the thing, if defensive gear like this was so useful, why hide it behind a puzzle that most players forget about? Keep that in mind, because the answer shows how From Software tests player memory across 100-hour campaigns. Founding Rain of Stars. This sorcery creates a massive magical meteor shower that deals damage over a wide area, making it one of the most visually impressive spells in the game. You find it in a chest at the top of the heretical rise tower in the mountaintops of the Giants, accessed by crossing an invisible bridge over a ravine, visible via white mist or at night, starting from the opposite side near the Snow Valley Ruins Overlook Site of Grace. The spell costs high FP, but deals significant damage to groups of enemies or slower bosses, with each meteor tracking independently. The founding name connects to the primeval sorceries and the study of glintstone magic from the stars. Visually, casting this spell looks like summoning an actual meteor storm, with golden blue projectiles raining down in a beautiful cascade. Intelligence builds use this for crowd control and boss damage, especially against large targets that can't dodge the spread. The fact that From Software hid this behind another invisible bridge puzzle, similar to the Silver Scarabs area, shows their commitment to testing player observation in frustrating areas. The community loves this spell for screenshots and boss fights, with guide views in the millions, but the real genius is how From Software made you earn it with no easy path, no obvious clues, just pure exploration and trust in the process. Meteor showers look incredible, but From Software saved their most sadistic secret for players who thought they'd seen everything. Spoiler, it involves wall abuse. Dagger Talisman. This talisman boosts critical hit damage by 17%, which makes it essential for builds focusing on ripostes, backstabs, or guard counters. It's hidden in a chest in Volcano Manor, which sounds simple until you realize you must drop down to a hidden ledge to platform from the entrance area that most players miss. Access requires 2 Stone Sword keys to dispel the imp-sealed fog door near the Manor throne room. Head west upstairs before the waygate to Audience Pathway, then drop down platforms through caged rooms past enemies to reach the corpse with the talisman. The 17% crit boost is huge for PvP and PvE builds that rely on punishing enemy mistakes. Pair this with a misrecord dagger and you're basically one-shotting enemies off riposts. 50 hits was the warm-up. What From Software hid in the next room could delete entire boss health bars in one attack if you bothered to check the side rooms. Royal Knight's Resolve. This Ash of War boosts your next attack by 80%, which is absolutely broken for one-shot builds and boss strategies. You find it in Volcano Manor, specifically in a side room that most players miss because they're focused on the assassination questline. The 80% damage boost works on any weapon, making it perfect for colossal swords, great hammers, or charged spell setups. You pop the buff, wind up your heaviest attack, and delete health bars in a single hit. PvP players love this for ambush tactics, while PvE players use it to skip entire boss phases. The Royal Knight's Resolve synergizes with charged attacks and jump attacks, stacking multiplicatively with other damage buffs. The fact that it's sitting in a chest in Volcano Manor while most players are busy following Tanith's questline shows From Software's love of hiding power in plain sight. About 35% of strength builds use this Ash according to loadout data, making it one of the most popular offensive tools in the game. The name connects to the Knights of Leyndell and their dedication to overwhelming force, fitting the lore about the Royal Army's tactics. But here's where it gets interesting. If this Ash of War was so powerful, why place it in an optional manner that players can completely miss? Because From Software rewards exploration over linear progression. Damage buffs win fights. But what about just not dying? From Software hid that solution in an underground kingdom most players never knew existed, Prince of Death's Pustule. This talisman raises faith by 15 and boosts vitality, death blight resistance. It's hidden in a pit below Stormvale Castle. From Liftside Chamber Site of Grace, drop down the chasm carefully, defeat the ulcerated tree spirit, then loot the corpse next to the giant root-like face tied to Godwyn Sichosh Prince of Death lore. The 90 vitality boost makes this talisman essential for survival builds and PvP setups, where every HP point matters. About 40% of players miss Deep Root Depths entirely according to achievement tracking, which means they never get this talisman. From Software designed this area as a reward for thorough underground exploration, connecting it to Fia's questline and the Ranni path. The pustule design looks gross and thematic, fitting the Death Blight aesthetic. The community debates whether this or other vitality talismans are better, but the consensus is that 90 flat vitality is huge for low-level builds. Survival gear keeps you alive, but the DLC introduced something weird, an item that controls time itself. Sort of. And it only works on NPCs, which raises some disturbing questions about From Software's NPC philosophy. Thialir's Concoction. This DLC item puts NPCs to sleep for 24 hours in-game time, which has specific uses in questlines and NPC interactions. You get it from Thialir's quest in Shadow of the Erdtree, which requires following his storyline and making specific dialogue choices. The concoction works on certain NPCs, allowing you to manipulate quest outcomes or access areas that would otherwise be block. It's a niche item, but essential for completionists who want every quest ending and dialogue option. The 24-hour sleep duration means you have to manage in-game time carefully, resting at sites of grace to advance the clock. Thelia's character ties into the DLC's poison and sleep themes, connecting to Saint Trina's expanded lore. Only about 10% of DLC players complete his full questline according to tracking data, which makes this concoction one of the rarer finds. From Software loves putting quest-critical items behind NPC interactions that are easy to mess up, requiring precise timing and dialogue choices. The concoction's existence shows how the DLC expanded on manipulation mechanics beyond combat, but niche quest items were just the setup. What comes next is where From Software started hiding entire gameplay mechanics behind secrets that most players never discover. Quest manipulation seemed harmless, until you realize From Software designed an entire hidden system around player memory, environmental awareness, and trust. Every secret we covered wasn't just hidden, it was testing something specific about how you play. The Golden Scarab tested your patience. The Silver Scarab tested your thoroughness. The Blade of Calling tested your willingness to jump into the void. And that pattern? It's deliberate. From Software isn't just hiding items, they're profiling players, sorting the explorers from the rushers, the wall smackers from the guide followers. The real question isn't why these items are hidden, it's what From Software learns about you when you find them. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every secret law in Dark Souls explained, click the video on the screen.